Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the top 25 that actually makes sense here on the voice of college football. Mark Rogers, our fearless leader and the voice of college football himself, will be joining us in just a few moments. He's currently indisposed, but taking care of some important stuff for the channel, but we didn't want you guys to wait. So we're going to be here tonight talking about the top 25 that actually make sense. To get us started, though, my name is Tony Alsmore. I'm here with Rick, LBC Trojan.
What's up, Tony?
And we are going to talk to you guys about a couple of other things as we get ready to roll here. Mark will be with us. Don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to argue about the top 25 that actually makes sense. But as you guys know, the top 25 that actually makes sense gets a lot of you guys riled up. And we figured where there's fire, why not add just a little more gasoline? And so we're going to add into the top 25 that actually makes sense. This week's another ranking. We have this week's 12P5 poll from our Pac-12 chat show, which is where we've gotten together an entire group of Mark's Patreon community and created a simulated playoff poll for what it would be like if the playoffs began today. And we call it the 12P5 ranking. So LBC, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the 12P5 ranking, where it started, what it is, and what folks are about to hear.
Hey, thanks, Tony. So it's kind of an interesting story. A lot of people ask why the name LBC, what's that? It all kind of started in a community 20 years ago at ESPN. ESPN had a message board back in, this was, I would say, the summer of 2002, like 20 years ago. And that was my screen name, LBC Trojan. I think that's probably about the time Mark started working, ironically, at ESPN, or probably shortly before that. Well, there was a lot of great excitement with USC, with Pete Carroll finishing his first season, and a loss to Utah in the Las Vegas Bowl on Christmas Day, 2001. I was actually at that game, sitting in the rain with my wife. But there was a lot of great excitement between 2001, 2002. First year, Pete Carroll finished 6-6, and that summer, I got introduced to the ESPN message board, and there was a lot of doubters about USC, which is kind of funny because that's how it is this year, especially teams in the Big Ten and the SEC. But there was one guy that a USC guy, and we kind of had a few laughs that year, because the next year in 2002, USC started 5-2 before the break. Ironically, they had losses to Kansas State on the road. That was a team with L. Robertson and Darren Sproles and Terrence Newman, for some of you old schoolers that might remember that. And then they lost up at Washington State in Pullman to a great Washington State team. On defense, you had Jason David. You had another DB slipping in my mind, and the quarterback was Jason Gesser. They were a 10-3 team. And USC had the break, kind of like they have the break now, at 6-1. They came back and they beat Stanford on the road handily, I think 47-13, and they went on to roll and beat Iowa in the 2003 Orange Bowl. Carson Palmer got the Heisman Trophy. They finished the year blowing out a 25th ranked UCLA 52-21, and they beat a number 6 Notre Dame in the Coliseum. I think it was 44-13. So similarities to this year. Fast forward, a lot of excitement. And I came across Mark Rogers, voice of college football, like many of you have, but it was this summer, and kind of flashed back to 20 years, some similarities. And that's where I met Tony and Tim on the chat, on videos such as this. And then I heard about Patreon, and I joined Patreon probably in late July. And great community. It's actually, this community is very similar to the community I was speaking about on the ESPN college football message board, but this is at another level. And Mark has done an exceptional job building this channel for 10 years, and then Patreon. So I had the opportunity, meeting Tim and Tony, to get on the USC postgame show. So very excited to do that, as well as the Pac-12 show. But during Patreon, I was talking to these guys before the season started, and I think Mark even mentioned on a couple of shows, he was going to go back and do certain years with this 12-team playoff. As you know, that news broke that the managers' college football committee made up of presidents and chancellors released on Friday, September 2nd, the day before most games start on September 3rd, that there will be a 12-team playoff. So that sparked my idea. Why don't we see what the college football 12-team playoff would look like this year as we move forward? We'll release the first one on Wednesday the 5th, knowing that the 4-team playoff that's on ESPN, the College Football Playoff Committee, they release, I think, their first rankings. It might be this Sunday or the following Sunday. So I think our first release was on the 5th. There was a lot of, suggestions, opinions, comments, thinking it was just the Pac-12 guys that was doing it. No, we have a dozen fans on Patreon that we opened it up to everybody. And we have 12 that are basically representing every Power 5 conference and independents. Will is the Notre Dame guy. So this is the 3rd iteration. And as the great season keeps on happening with all these upsets and future games that are coming up, here we go. Mark's given us the opportunity to go ahead and release it on his show today. We're very excited. And Tony, without further ado, that is why we call it, actually, it's the 5P for short. It's the 12 pack because it premiered on the Pac-12 live chat show. So it's the 12 pack Patreon playoff predictor poll. So we're looking for a beer sponsor, kind of go with 12 pack. So if you know anybody, that would be great. Tony?
We'll take them. We'll take them.
Let's
All
do
right,
it,
guys,
man.
let's give it, without further ado, let's talk about who you guys voted for. So this is your Voice of College Football Patreon community, who you voted and ranked and who you think should be in a hypothetical playoff if the playoff were to start today. So once again, this is your choice. You got to hear Mark Rogers' top 25 that actually makes sense. Now you're going to see your top 12 that you voted on as a community. So in first place, likely hosting the Sugar Bowl, you guys voted for your projected SEC champion, Georgia. Any surprises there, guys?
Nope.
Yes.
No real surprises. We'll cut that. We'll keep that short. No real surprises there. Next one.
Full disclosure, I am a voter, and I voted this week Tennessee. I have Tennessee.
All right.
And that's my number one.
All right. Number 2. Let's see who you guys took. You guys took the Ohio State Buckeyes. Fight the team across the field. Show them Ohio's here. You guys put them as number 2 with the Big Ten champion, likely hosting the Rose Bowl. Now, this was my number 1 pick. I gave it to the Buckeyes. Go Bucks. What did you guys think?
Yeah, no, it's a good spot for the Buckeyes. I'm in agreement with number 2. Yeah, I put number 2, actually.
All right.
I'm in agreement as well.
Next up to bat, actually the 5 seed, the Tennessee Volunteers. Because remember, guys, in the new playoff structure, at least the way that it's laid out right now, supposedly, the 4 highest rated conference champions will get the bye. So Tennessee, as hypothetically the voters our Voice of College Football Patreon community voters have said that they are next up to bat. So they're going to be number 5th. They're going to host a first round playoff game at Neyland Stadium, which I understand going to have some new goalposts put up today. All right. Next up to bat, the Clemson Tigers hosting the Orange Bowl in Miami. Guys, no real shock there. I think, yeah, the Patreon community has been pretty solid in their voting in thinking that Clemson is going to stay on and win straight out. So then, actually, next up, actually, I'm sorry, these are actually, I got the order screwed up here, but Alabama's number 7, sorry, and Michigan's number 6. I flipped sorry, I was frantically animating this and I put them in the wrong order. But Alabama and Michigan are both hosting games at home. No big surprises there, guys?
No, the Big Ten and the SEC heavily populating the early going here.
Exactly. We got 1 ACC team. We got 3 SEC and 2 Big Ten teams here in our top 7. So let's see. Finishing number 8 and getting the 4 seed are the TCU Horned Frogs. And I think that was DeReal was saying he hopes TCU makes this playoff. TCU will be hosting the Cotton Bowl. They got to stay home, sleeping at home in Dallas. What do you guys think about that?
That makes sense because if you remember the first reiteration, USC was I believe, a 4. And at that time they were undefeated. I think Utah was also in there. I believe Oregon may have been there as well. There was 3 Pac-12 teams, which, oh my God, blew everybody's mind. Oh my goodness. You Pac-12 guys are a bunch of homers. And
You know what? How about this? Who wants to make a bet? Because I'll wear UCLA face tattoos on our. I'll wear UCLA face tattoos on our pack show if TCU goes undefeated.
Well,
like,
but here's the thing.
I think this is the Big 12's. I think this is the Big 12's Make-A-Wish Kid of the Week.
Here's the thing. This is the unenviable spot right here. But this time though, it's not up against Alabama. So now, you know, but that 5 spot's always gonna be a nasty one, I think. So if you get that 4, you know, we were talking about this, Tony, and then Tony, you said you were talking to Rick about it too. You know, that 4 seed spot's always gonna be a nasty spot because you're gonna end up getting the second highest, either probably Big Ten or SEC team. So it's not a very enviable spot being in that 4 slot.
Yeah, and
I think that 5 spot. Yeah, I think that 5 spot should be known as the SEC spot, and that should be sponsored by Waffle House. That's what I think.
Sponsored by Waffle House. I like that. I like that. I like to think it might become a Big Ten spot. I mean, you never know what's going to end up there, but it's going to be. It's usually that number 5 seed who's going to go into that number 4 seed. It's always going to be somebody who is higher ranked, but it's going to be the number 1 team that's not a conference champion. And as these conferences get bigger, if they're only still doing, now some of the conferences have talked about maybe going to 4-team like mini conference playoffs, but if there's still going to be only 2 teams in a 16-team conference, you know, who gets left out is going to be a real issue. And so that is really going to be an interesting spot. Again, there's some great Big 12 teams this year. I think we've kind of, it's been really cute. It's been adorable. Like, I love it for them, but like, we've kind of had a bit of these Make-A-Wish Kid of the Weeks. TCU is not one of the, 8 best teams in the country. I just do not think that they are.
Bite your tongue, Tony. Bite your tongue. We don't know.
Bite my tongue. Okay, I'll bite my tongue. But yeah, again, whoever wants to make it a reasonable bet, I am more than willing to wear UCLA face tattoos on the pack show if TCU were to somehow ridiculously go undefeated. I don't think they survived this week. All right, let's see. Next up to bat, we've got the UCLA Bruins slated to host a game here in Pasadena. Guys, what do you think about this? The Pac-12 champs hosting a playoff game in Pasadena? What do we think?
There'll be plenty of tickets
available. A home game. It's literally a home game for them. So
literally, well, I mean, it would be a home game. Yeah, I also don't think that they've UCLA guys. I got to be honest. In my 20-some years of watching UCLA very, very, very closely, they never fail to disappoint just when you think they're going to win. So I would love for them to do this. I don't see it.
Whoever's the 9 seed is going to have a home game.
Yeah, exactly. Whoever's got the 9 seed, there'll be 40,000 spare seats in the playoff for your favorite fans. And that is Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin going back to the Rose Bowl. Guys, that would be an awesome game right there. That would be an amazing football game.
And have Ed Orgeron flip the coin.
Yeah, Edo flips the coin. I like that. Lane Kiffin will insist that the plane land at Burbank because he is not going to walk in that LAX tarmac anymore.
Good point.
All right. What we got next? Oregon going to Tuscaloosa. Bo Nix returning to Tuscaloosa. And then the winner going to play Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. Guys, that is awesome.
Hey, Oregon gets a do-over versus the SEC, right? First game of the year. Could be the last game of the year. Come on, bookends. Let's see how good you guys are. Come on, Ducks. Going to Tuscaloosa.
You check out how cool that is. You got that Alabama-Oregon game in Tuscaloosa, which would be amazing. Winner goes to the Rose Bowl. That could be an Ohio State-Oregon Rose Bowl. Guys, these are 2 sweet brackets we've got so far.
Well, check this out, Tony. This is what I love. These games, it's brilliant that they should be at the higher seed home stadium. Because look at what we've seen this year. We saw Alabama go into Austin, right? That was a great scene. How can we not forget what just happened in Knoxville? Taking the goalpost down and shoving them the river, right? That's a great atmosphere. You had Penn State, Ohio State. That was an awesome scene. So those are just 3 great games off the top of my head with the college atmosphere that I can recall so far this year. We're going to have one coming up with UCLA traveling to Autzen, with game day going to be there. If I've missed a few great games with the college home atmosphere, please put them down in the chat.
All right. Next up to bat, who is going to Ann Arbor, guys? Dun, 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 dun. The voters, and again, these are voters from every single conference and independence that we've assembled through the Patreon community, and they are sending USC to Ann Arbor with the winner facing Clemson in the Orange Bowl. This is also an awesome bracket. How fun would that USC-Michigan game be?
Tim, what do you think of that?
A nice traditional power. I'm not sure exactly how fun it's going to be to play in Ann Arbor in December, but you know,
it'll be a warm December.
It would be a beautiful matchup, like that we would miss out on maybe in a traditional Rose Bowl, like in the old days, right? Because Ohio State would play in the playoffs or the BCS if it was way back, and then usually you slot in Michigan, so it'd be Michigan and USC playing in the Rose Bowl or possibly UCLA. So I think it's great. I love those. I mean, I remember those 80s Rose Bowls, you know, the 2003 Rose Bowl, actually it was 2004 Rose Bowl for the 2003 season against Michigan. I mean, I love that. I love the Michigan band. I love their fans. It'd be an amazing matchup.
And just a reminder for folks, we're seeing lots of comments in the chat here. Remember, guys, that the top 4 seeds are the top 4 ranked conference champions. So to somebody going, Michigan shouldn't be this. Remember, guys, you have to be a top 4 seeded conference champion to get one of those top 4 seeds. So that's the way the structure is built. You know, it rewards the top 4 conference champions. So, and remember also that it guarantees a spot to the top 6 conference champions. So our next teams are the bubble ones, the teams that are bumped out. And those are Syracuse and Wake Forest. So 2 teams from the ACC are our next teams bumped out. What do you guys think about that?
I think that's accurate. You got Syracuse at 6-0. They're going to be tested the next 2 weeks. Wake Forest is, I believe, 5-1, 6-1. I think that's about right. Spot on.
Yeah, eventually, yeah.
Now, we're looking at some amazing games here. Somebody in the chat, and due respect, just made the dumbest comment I've ever seen. Says, how about just admitting playoffs are ridiculous and stupid? I think this would be the most awesome thing that had ever happened to the sport. This certainly beats the Bahamas Bowl and the Meineke Car Care Bowl. I mean, both those will still happen, I'm sure. But, I mean, these would be incredible games that would command tens of millions of people at each game to watch. These would literally transform.
Absolutely. I know in my lifetime, Ole Miss has never visited UCLA. Oregon has never visited Tuscaloosa. And SC has never visited Michigan.
I thought they have a long time ago.
I'm not that old, Tony. Not that old.
Lifetime.
Yeah, not in our lifetime. I think they have a long time ago.
Yeah. And then I think that's just fantastic. Fantastic.
I agree.
The one thing
is Triple X, I agree with you. This would be so fun. And again, this is stuff that you guys voted on, guys. So how fun is that? Has SC ever been East Mississippi? All the time. USC plays games all the time. Virginia Tech, Syracuse. They loved games east of Mississippi, especially in big cities. The guy
Tony,
was asking.
Who's our number 12 team, Tony?
Our number 12 team rounding out this bracket are the Cincinnati Bearcats. I put my vote in for Tulane because I'm putting Tulane over Cincinnati. Go roll wave. That may or may not be right. I just like Tulane. I think they're pretty strong and having a great year this year. So you got Cincinnati going to Tennessee and then TCU. I'll be honest, guys. I think Tennessee just blasts everybody through that whole Cotton Bowl bracket. And then we're going to get probably a Tennessee Georgia rematch. I like it.
You could potentially have 3 SEC teams in the semifinals. I mean, Ohio State would have something to say about that. But
Yeah, that Ohio State Alabama game, we've seen a lot of weakness with Alabama a couple different times. I mean, you guys know I'm all on the Alabama train. They're an amazing team, but we've seen a lot of weakness from them that I think they might have trouble getting past back to back Oregon and Ohio State. Versus, I think Tennessee can just roll both those teams.
Well, and Alabama and Oregon have recent victories against Ohio State, so that would be an interesting matchup.
Very true. Very true. I think and so guys, this is exactly what we're going to see with a college football playoff expansion, which is pretty cool. Again, I liked it better when the models that have 16. I think that they're really cool, but this is a 12 team, which is pretty sweet.
I actually like USC's 11 seed spot a whole lot better than sitting in the 4 spot. Easier side of the bracket.
I know. So those of you guys that watched our Pac-12 show last week, we had Ohio State as the next team. Or excuse me, USC as that number 4 seed, and then and they were pretty much going to get slaughtered, I think, by Georgia or Alabama or whoever was the flavor of the week there. And so, I mean, if you're going to be somewhere, that 4 seed is going to be a dangerous place. Whoever really, somebody's so upset in the chat. Oh well, then don't watch the games. The beauty is there will be an episode of NCIS that you can watch on another channel if you don't want to watch college football games. What do you guys think there though about one of the interesting things is we've talked a little bit how those bowl games will probably fit in. Do you like the idea that the bowl games will become those semifinal games, or do you kind of wish that the bowl games were separate?
I like the.
I'm undecided.
I like the setup.
Okay. More games equals more money. Yeah, we used to have a chant about that at USC. USC students have a chant about that. It goes, the Rose Bowl T-shirts, more money. It's kind of fun. It's kind of ridiculous.
Hey, Tony.
Michigan trucks the Trojans maybe this year, Mike.
Tony, while we're waiting for Mark, why don't we take a call or two and
sure.
See what they have to say? I've seen some good comments in the chat. I've seen some negative comments. So if you don't like the format, call in. If you like the format, tell us what you like. Let's take some calls.
Yeah, and I mean, this is happening. So, if you're somebody that says, like, let's just go back to the Stone Age, that's not going to happen. But, like, we'd love to hear your thoughts on, like, what the playoff committee could do that would actually improve.
And if you'd like to be a voter this year,
that's a really interesting debate.
If you'd like to be a voter this year, join Patreon.
Yeah, so, and obviously I haven't been following exactly who's. Sorry, I'm working the screen here, so I haven't been following the chat exactly, guys. I'm sorry, but are there who of our voters are in the chat? All right, right now, guys, kicking off as is customary, the honorary gentleman from the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. Let's welcome DeReal MVP. DeReal, what do you think here?
Hello. Well, first off, hello everybody, and thanks for having me on.
Hey, DeReal.
Here, man.
Welcome.
This bracket that's been displayed, I think, is by far the most uninteresting bracket. I don't see any real competitive games now. The Alabama-Ohio State game, if that turns out, that's going to be an all-time great game.
That would be.
But that's the only game I see within this entire bracket that I think will be within, other than the national championship game and Georgia-Tennessee, that will be even within 30 points. Like,
see, wait, hold on. We go rewind that. So you're telling me that Michigan beats USC by 30 points? Is that what you said?
Yes.
30 points.
I think the lines of scrimmage for Michigan are so much better than USC. I think they could legitimately run the ball every play of the game and have like 500 yards of rushing. And that wouldn't be an indictment on USC. Did you see what they did to Penn State?
Yeah. Oh, no, Michigan's really good.
DeReal, hold on a second, DeReal. What were you doing in 2004, DeReal?
Oh, my gosh. I don't know.
Okay.
Actually, hold on, DeReal, hold on. I'm going to pause this one because they're having like heart disease right now. I think that Michigan. I would actually think that Michigan beats Clemson. To be totally honest, Clemson's really good, but I think Michigan beats Clemson.
Yeah, I have the Final Four being Georgia, Tennessee, Michigan, and I'm going with Bama just because they're Bama. But it would not shock me if Ohio State made it.
Yeah. Okay, I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah.
Back
Yeah,
into
the real. I think.
Tony, let me
Sorry,
get
go
in.
ahead.
So I ask you this question. So you're telling me that Ole Miss beats UCLA by 30 and Michigan beats USC by 30. So you're saying, so here's my question to you. Here's the thing. I'm not saying Michigan isn't going to win. And I'm sure that Michigan's going to run all over USC. But you're telling me that USC gets shut out or something? Because how many points do you see Michigan scoring to win by 30? What is your score?
I think it could be a 56-14 type of game.
So you think Michigan's holding USC's offense to 14 points? Really?
We see all-time great, what we thought were great units that get completely exposed in the playoffs. It's seriously. Look at Michigan. How much we thought they were a great running team last year. And then they played Georgia, and Michigan couldn't run the ball to save their life.
Remember, you almost made me want to bring up that bet we had at the beginning of the season, the real.
Well, Will Levis got hurt. Will Levis got hurt for a game.
Hey, you backed out that bet?
Yeah, I did.
You backed out that bet well before Levis got hurt.
Excuse me. But right? I don't think this will be forget about that game. Let's say it's competitive. Let's say USC loses by 7 or 10. But I don't think they're going to win.
I don't think they would either, especially in Ann Arbor in December, on the road. Yeah, I don't think they win that game. Yeah, I agree with you. But when you start throwing words like 30 points around, and again, I don't think that Ole Miss beats UCLA by 30.
I think Ole Miss beats UCLA by 30 plus. I mean, I just don't think I'm not sold into UCLA at all. I'm just not sold.
No. I don't think they win. So here's what you keep saying. I think USC and UCLA could score points.
Yeah, I think they could score.
So when you
14, 21 points.
Excuse me, Daryl, hold on. They're going to score more than 14 points, both those teams. UCLA is going to score more than 14 points on Ole Miss.
Ole Miss's defense has been pretty good this year, and their offense is elite.
I know that they're in the SEC. I do know they're in SEC.
If Ole Miss scores 63, UCLA's got to score 33. Do you think that's going to happen?
UCLA is in the lowly pack.
I don't think Ole Miss is scoring that much on UCLA. I am not as bought into Ole Miss because I've also watched Ole Miss try to get some extra points by running the ball up with the last minute to go after they've played pretty pathetically the whole game. I don't know. Plus, Lane Kiffin has a remarkable ability to perform poorly in LA.
That is true, but I think he is evolved as a head coach and as a person too.
I'm just teasing.
I disagree with that Lane Kiffin comment. He performed.
I love it. Sorry, to our regular viewers, no, I actually love Lane Kiffin. I think he's awesome.
Can I respond to Daryl?
It's impossible to talk on the show. Good God.
All right. Can I respond to Daryl?
Go for it.
All right. And Tony and Tim, you may remember this, but in the 2003 season, USC was left out of the national championship, and we played Michigan in the Rose Bowl. That team was John DeVar, and they had a big offensive line. And we had to hear how they were going to run all over USC, and there's no way that they're going to be able to pressure Navarre. And Navarre had only been sacked 6 times all year. That's the team with Braylon Edwards and Chris Perry. They were going to smoke USC. And, this was Pete Carroll's third year, and USC was just starting to get a rep, kind of full circle now. And USC destroyed Michigan 28-14. Wasn't even that close. They owned Michigan. So I understand Daryl, but sometimes history repeats itself. And just because it looks great on paper, it doesn't always happen that way. That's all.
No, we don't have Sean Cody or Patterson or those guys on our defensive line yet, but in a couple of years we will. But the only issue I have with you, Daryl, is I do see those teams. I see UCLA.
I do have to agree with Mark. I have to agree with Mark. I'm not making that comparison.
No, and nor am I. What I just said was we don't have those guys we don't have Cody or Patterson, those kind of guys. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is USC, yes, they lose. UCLA, yeah, they most likely lose. But I don't know where Daryl's setting this line. Because Daryl, if you want, and obviously the fictional world, I hope you're not setting lines for real money because you would be losing a lot of money setting lines like that. That's all I'm gonna say.
No,
I'm
I
not
don't.
Mark.
I don't bet. I don't gamble. I've never placed a bet in my life, so I don't. You don't have to worry about that, Tim. But there is a few things. I mean, first off, we got historical precedent, which is the LBC argument of look at the playoff games. They've all been blowouts except for like 3 or 4. That's got to factor into it. And there's just this gap, I think, on the lines of scrimmage for both of these games.
But the flaw in that is you're usually looking at a 1 seed versus a 4 seed, those big blowouts, right? We're talking about a 6 and an 11. And I like what Jim Harbaugh has been doing for quite some time. Jim Harbaugh hasn't got credit for a long time. He's winning in Ann Arbor. But now I think this team is solid, but I don't think they're unbeatable. I think they do have an amazing defense, but I just don't see it being a blowout. I think USC keeps it definitely within 17 points.
Well, Tim, that's a little deceptive because they are the 6th seed, but they are the 4th best team or the 5th best team according to this model.
We really don't know that. Here's the thing:
TCU, I'm not placing over Michigan.
That's what the voters said.
If Penn State is as great as we think they are, then okay, yeah. But besides Penn State, really, who has Michigan?
I think they were great as they were.
Who are we impressed with?
We're now saying Michigan is in the top 14.
Taking care of the teams the way they should, and they're with the people they're getting, they are handling them the way they should. I'm not slighting Michigan, but I'm not ready to call them world beaters yet. They aren't 19 LSU. You know what I mean? We need to slow down a little bit on how great we think these teams are.
I'm not saying Michigan's going to win the Natty. All I'm saying is that they're a top 14.
Well, and also let's point out that Darrell's also saying, and he's allowed to think this, that Michigan is going to roll Clemson. And frankly, actually, Darrell, I kind of think you might be right on that.
Yeah, I don't think they'll roll them by 30, but I think it'll be 21 to 24 points.
I agree with you. So and Clemson, he's allowed to think that Michigan beats SC. That's very fair. I think that.
Right.
I don't think they beat them by 30. I think they beat them by
Ohio State, Tennessee, Alabama, or Georgia. I wouldn't have them making the semifinals. It's just this bracket for Michigan, I think, is a favorable matchup for them.
Yeah, especially it'd be cold, and this is actually an interesting debate with our talking about games. Is that when we talk about USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten? I grew up in Michigan, guys, and I grew up in Michigan with cheering for Michigan. So I mean, I know the temperature of Michigan games at different weeks. There's a big difference between playing in Michigan on November 15th and playing in Michigan on December 15th.
Yeah, and I'll be honest. I mean, Michigan beat Ohio State last year, and that was great for them. I think the weather played somewhat of a factor in that.
I think it played a massive factor in it. You're right.
Right, and Southern Cal, I mean, it's not like it's snowing all year around there. I mean, it won't be one way or another going to decide the game, but I think it could add to the score a little bit for Michigan.
And I think you're right, Darrell, because December 15th is a different. This is actually one of the hard things about that playoff scheduling.
The rosters for USC are not made up of 100% guys from Southern California.
No, they're not. They're not.
Tim grew up in Texas, Oklahoma, all over the country. So,
all right, guys, we got callers backing up. We're not talking about the 6 versus 11 game anymore. What else on there do we want to debate? Our viewers, I think, are sick of that one.
Anybody issues with Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Michigan, or Alabama for Ohio State? That's fine as well. But at least 2 SEC teams making the Final Four.
Yeah, and this I think so.
Yes,
I think that Darrell. I think that left side of the bracket. I think Georgia, and Tennessee roll through, and that comes to what we talked about. And some of you guys weren't with us. Darrell was with us on the Pack Show last week as we talked about the exact same thing. That number 5 slot, I think, just plows through the number 4 slot. And by the way, that number 5 slot could be Tennessee, it could be Michigan, it could be Georgia, it could be Alabama, it could be Ohio State. Whoever you think there is somebody that's just the best not champion of a conference. And I think they come through. I think they come through that number 4 slot with a bulldozer.
Right, and it's possible at the end of the season that we look back at it and realize that they're the best team or even the second best team. They're in that discussion because that's how Georgia was. Georgia probably would have gotten the 5 seed last year, and look what they did. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind they would roll whatever the 12 seed was last year and whatever the 4 seed was.
100%. Yeah, because exactly. Last year's Georgia team would have been that 5 seed.
Right. And I don't see that left side of the bracket being competitive in most years. Like, I think that is just a complete waste of time to for lack of better words at the moment. And man, I tell you what, Georgia having the bye or Alabama having the bye before UCLA and Ole Miss, that's so nice just because of the way Ole Miss plays and UCLA likes to run the ball, wears people down. The bye is a really, really, really big advantage. Is it too big of an advantage?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay. Well, that's all I got. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for calling in.
Yeah,
and
no
Mark
problem.
will be back in a little bit. I know he'd love to talk to you about the top 25 that actually makes sense.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I
Bill.
was going to ask him why South Alabama didn't make it today.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I know.
He'll be able to answer you.
Hopefully he will, because their only loss was to UCLA, and they've done pretty well against every other team they've played.
And I'll tell you, so what do you real quick? What do you guys think about this before Derail goes? We faulted UCLA a lot for that game, and I will admit, guilty as charged. We kind of mocked UCLA for that a lot, and that has now turned out to be just like Kansas State losing to Tulane, a really solid team.
Well, that's an example of recency bias. Everybody likes to do that because we live in a Twitter world, social media, which is even different than, I'm sounding like the old dude, but 20 years ago, nobody gave respect to USC after we lost to Washington State and lost to Kansas State earlier. But those were two quality teams back then. They were ranked, and then USC rolled. They won, I believe, like their last 6 games. And again, all the rhetoric that was coming out of the Orange Bowl about Brad Banks in Iowa. Speaking of Brad Banks in Iowa, I think Kirk Ferentz was still the coach. And don't you think, how would that team look this year with Brad Banks? Oh, my God. Now, that was a quarterback.
Actually, could they just go get Brad Banks? He's probably like 45, but they should just go get him anyway.
And Daryl, that was an example where a lot of people were talking smack. That wasn't going to happen. And he was going to show Carson Palmer who the true Heisman was. I'm just giving you a little history lesson. That game, Iowa ran back the initial kickoff for a touchdown, and that was pretty much all she wrote. They got a field goal. It was 38-10. There's your 28, 30-point spread. And in the last 30 seconds, they gave up a touchdown to Iowa, so they had a concession prize to go back home to Iowa in lousy weather. So there you go, 38-17. Rolled.
All right. Hey, Daryl, good luck. Good luck to your Wild. If I don't talk to you, good luck to your Wildcats this weekend.
Yeah, they played the bye this weekend, so hopefully they don't.
They're going to be. Hey, we like the bye. We like the bye. Get Will Levis back even more healthy.
Yeah, we'll need him against Rocky Top.
You guys might pull an upset. An upset could be brewing.
I don't know. I think Will Levis will be the best quarterback Tennessee has played all year, though. So.
Yeah, I think he will. All right. Well, good luck.
Thanks.
Talk to you soon. All right.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead, LBC.
Did he forget Bryce Young?
I don't know. Bryce. Will Levis got an arm. All right. Next up to bat, we've got a little big blue flavor in the house. Our next caller, Mike Fort. Mike, welcome to the show. Your Wolverines have got an interesting bracket here. What do you think?
I kind of like the bracket just from the fact that it'd be nice for you guys to come out here for once, because every time we have to play SC, it's in their backyard.
Yeah, because who doesn't? Hey, listen, because who doesn't want a vacation in Ann Arbor in December, right?
Okay, yeah, okay. There's that.
Commerce Day is going to be beautiful.
There's that.
Yeah, okay. The weather's more fair. I just, it's kind of upsetting that you guys can jog to the stadium in the time it takes for us to get out of the airport.
In all fairness, actually, you can drive to the UP faster than USC can get to the Rose Bowl some days of the week.
And I'll say this: when they come up for
LA
the bowl
traffic.
game,
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's hell on the 405, huh?
Sorry, Tim. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was just saying it's a week. So the Big 12, Big 10 team comes out to Pasadena. It's not like they're flying in on a Friday and then rushing off to a game on Saturday morning. They come and they're there all week long. So the whole thing about travel, when we hear that, it's just kind of weak, really, and because it's perfect weather. Like, I'm sure you guys are, oh cool, we we can get the advantage with the weather or whatever. I think you guys are overhyping the idea that USC guys are little lilies that are going to freeze up in the cold weather. I don't think that's going to happen. But it's more the fact that it's just perfect weather. When was the last time we saw it rain during a Rose Bowl? When was the last time we had sleet or snow during a Rose Bowl? You know what I mean? That's real football weather to me when there's no advantage to either team. So I don't really hear this. I hear a lot from the Big Ten saying, well, it's a home game for the Trojans. We don't play in the Rose Bowl. And again, you get there a whole week ahead of time. So I'm trying to figure out what's the huge advantage of playing in Southern California.
Well, I mean, there's, I know we're not showing up at leaving LAX going right to the Rose Bowl, but there's still an advantage. You still got to kind of get your wits about you.
It's literally a week, Mike. Literally a week. By then, I don't know if anyone's traveled here, but you can usually get rid of jet lag within the first 2 or 3 days. So yeah.
And I will say the weather does help. It's it's like playing a dome team.
It's just a beautiful setting for football. You can't get a better setting for football in January, period. And I don't think anywhere.
And the weather would help because USC's offense doesn't seem like it'd travel well. I would figure that Caleb Williams is not going to be on the mark. He's going to be Addison's going to be kind of shut down. You don't really have in my opinion, you don't really have the greatest ground game to really control.
Do you know where Caleb
defense is terrible?
Mike, do you know where Caleb Williams is from?
Where is he from? He's
from the DC area. So he's played in very cold weather his whole life. So it's not like he's immune to the cold, and he's not gonna be able to throw in the cold.
Yeah,
he played in Oklahoma, where it's not exactly late in November. It's not exactly like Southern California weather. So I think his arm will be okay in cold weather, as well as any other quarterbacks that'll hold up.
Well, I still like to see you guys go out to Ann Arbor, but I mean there are other games. Am I the only one that thinks that Alabama-Oregon is actually going to be a good game?
I do.
I can say there's some people out here just thinking Bama's just going to just lay a 50 spot on them.
You just said how bad USC's defense is. You know how bad Oregon's defense is?
Okay, it's not great.
It's actually statistically worse than USC's.
Well, Alabama's defense. I mean, didn't we just learn that Alabama's defense is a little overrated as well?
Yeah, but an overrated Alabama defense, overrated Alabama defense, I think is almost like an oxymoron, because I don't care if their third stringers are going to be better than the players out there for secondary for Oregon. In my opinion,
I will say this one: this game would look a little bit different in Autzen than it would in Bryant-Denny.
Yeah, Autzen's a very difficult place to play.
Yeah, I think you're right though, Mike. I think that would be a better game than people think it would be. I think Alabama wins, but I think it'd be a good game.
Here's a question. I don't know what the playoff committee is gonna how they're gonna distribute tickets for these first round home games, but bringing up the point about playing in the Rose Bowl, that you have a week to adjust. Those teams get equal amount of tickets for fans, and if you look at the bowl games, it's pretty well represented 50-50. Depending on whether or not the visiting team sells their seats, but it's usually that way. I wonder if these first round playoffs, I would think that they're going to treat them similar to a bowl game, where they're going to give at least the opportunity to the visiting team to have the same amount of tickets. Now, if they don't sell, they can give them back, obviously, to the home team. Has anybody heard anything about that, or that's way too premature?
I don't know anything about that.
I would think it would be 50-50.
Yeah.
Well, remember, it's not just 50-50, because there's lots of, whenever you have these things, there's lots of sponsor tickets, local community tickets, like stuff like that.
That are distributed teams. I mean, sure, there's probably going to be, good 10, 15,000 that are, going to be like corporate tickets and giveaway.
I mean, it's that number is usually like 60,000 of the 90,000 seat Rose Bowl. I think like 50,000 or something are just Rose Bowl.
That's
and then it's much. I forget the exact numbers, but it's something like 20,000 a team. I take 30,000 a team max.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've heard
that'd also be a benefit for you guys.
20 and 25.
So that's, and now what happens though, of course, is that usually the way that they do it is I think that they choose what side it's going to be on, and companies divide it all up. But those tickets very much go towards those folks, which is why playoff games are always a little, and conference championship games are always a little quieter than everywhere else. Like, for example, conference championship games, typically each school in the conference gets, 1,000 tickets to the game, something like that they give to their donors and their people and all that kind of stuff. So
it's a revenue stream.
Yeah, it's just ticket allocations.
Yeah, because obviously, if like I'm sure when we played Iowa last year, there weren't a whole lot of Indiana fans or Northwestern fans or Maryland fans there. If they got any tickets, you think they'd just be sold?
Yeah, but you'd be surprised. Like the different school, you get donors who have ties to one school or another, and they're well plugged into the ticket offices, and they, a lot of people just like to go to the game. So I think you'd see more of that too.
In schools, I've seen it myself. I've seen Nebraska travel. I've seen Penn State. I've seen Michigan. I've seen I can go on and on about the Big Ten schools. They come out in droves, right? They do.
Yeah, they do.
They travel well. But here's my question, and I'm not. Here comes the hate. California is kind of a vacation, in the bowl season. Like if you can come up to California in January, it's nice. You can make a week of it, right? And I'm not being rude, but there's some schools that a lot of people are getting excited to go spend a weekend or even a weekend, and they'll go for the game. But let's be honest, there's some places in the middle of winter. I'm sure there's some great things to do during the summertime, but in the middle of winter, you're not gonna, you can't sell these vacation trips like you can maybe something down to San Diego or down to Miami, right? It's just not the same thing.
Oh, I'd much rather go to the Orange Bowl in Miami. I have to work on my Spanish a little bit, but of course I'd probably have to work on my Spanish there in Los Angeles.
The Orange Bowl, the Orange Bowl is
here that speak Spanish, yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you as a part-time Florida resident that everyone you'll be just fine in Miami.
You don't need a foreign language.
Because I
don't need
I
a foreign
live down
language
in that area right now, but I've heard that you go into Miami and if you don't speak a lick of Spanish, you're kind of lost.
I can tell you that is 100% incorrect as a Florida resident.
Someone's messing with you. That's not even remotely true.
Yeah, they're totally messing with you. Anyway, thank you, Mike. We appreciate it.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys.
Good to have you. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, next up, we've got an Ohio State Buckeye here to defend the honor of the Buckeyes as they face Alabama or Oregon. David Greenshield, welcome.
Welcome, gentlemen. Great to see you guys on. By the way, I was gonna defend you on keeping it a little bit competitive, and I would take 30 points. By the way, if you guys were getting 30 points against
literally the entire country,
I'd be all over that.
Yeah,
to be honest with you, give me 30 points.
Good investment.
Yes. As a gambling man, I would be prone to take that one. I think Caleb Williams is slightly better than Sean Clifford, but I digress. Plus, I think your wide revers are slightly better than Penn State's, but I could be off on that one. I don't even think that's close.
Well, people don't realize how good our offensive line is as well. It just is one of the best units in the country, period.
No, I don't think you're stopping their run game, to be fair. But
I'm not defense, but offense. Yeah.
Right. No, I think you can put some points on the board. I get where you guys were going with that. I will say this. I would wonder what the over in Ohio State, Alabama would be. That would actually be a shootout. I would love to see that game.
It would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah. The way that Hooker exposed that secondary, I think CJ Stroud could do some damage there. The strength of Alabama is they've got really good linebackers, although I've not seen the dominant force that is Will Anderson this year, who is supposed to be the best defensive player in college football. Or at least it really didn't show up against Tennessee. Let me put it that way. But I do think Alabama is really dangerous still. I think these people that are trying to write the obituary of Alabama, I've heard people do that in the past, and it's not always gone well. I will say that. I don't know if you guys have been hearing that same thing.
Oh, of course. It's just, again, recency bias. Nick Saban, never doubt Nick Saban. There's still a lot of season to be played. That team will be ready for the postseason. Absolutely.
Yeah, I do. I'm going to be interested to see that Ole Miss Alabama game, but that actually also could be a big time shootout. I actually do think I think Alabama would take care of Oregon pretty easily, especially at Bryant Denny. They might be able to put some points on the board. Although I know you guys like the Bo Nix has been playing pretty well for Oregon, but I just have never been a buyer in him as a quarterback. Maybe watching his days at Auburn, I was never sold on him.
Well, a lot of it. Sometimes if a quarterback goes to a different place, I mean, just maybe sometimes you need a different home, different place. I don't know if you watch this game, but he does not look like the Bo Nix at Auburn. He doesn't. He does a whole different. I am not the kind of guy that's going to send a lot of praise towards Eugene. I'm just not. But I will tell you this: I was wrong about Bo Nix so far.
And Tim, I think you're especially right. Another great example, Adrian Martinez.
Right.
Yeah. Another guy that I think Tim makes a great point on that. Sometimes somebody gets into a new home and things are good. Well, guys, we now are joined by our fearless leader.
The legend.
Welcome, the voice of college football, Mark Rogers.
This show is going along so nicely. I hate to crash it.
Oh, wow. I think they're waiting for you, Mark. Trust me.
They are. They're not here for us. They're here for the guru.
I get to share the screen with a legend, ladies and gentlemen.
Like you haven't before, David.
Yes.
Now, come on.
He meant me, Mark. He meant me.
Actually, right. I was talking about Tim.
Well, he definitely didn't mean me. I know that for sure.
Mark, so what do you think? Are you taking USC plus 30 against Michigan?
Oh, give me the 30. Yes. Give me the 20. Give me the 10. I'll take the 10. I'll take the touchdown. I'll take something in that range.
Are you buying that weather would slow down that USC offense, Mark?
Oh, so we're playing so this is my first glance at the brackets. Okay, so yeah, we're in Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
December 15th.
The 17th of December. So at very best, it's like what, mid to high 40s?
At best.
At worst, it's
flurries.
Colorado weather.
Yeah, it's a blizzard. But usually not too well. You know what? I'm an Ohio guy, so that's like 3 to 4 hours north. So it's even worse up there, because I was just about to say we usually don't see hardly any snow until after Christmas. There's usually not. I would bet, David, wouldn't you bet that there's more Christmases without snow than with snow?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, Mark. It seems to get dicier come January and February than it does, even in or like earlier December, mid-December.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not like headed to the beach in December,
right?
But it's not what we think of, like 3 feet of snow and 18 degrees. But yeah, those USC guys aren't going to feel too comfy.
Can I throw out one more game here, guys, that I actually do think would be interesting here? I actually think UCLA and Ole Miss would be interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think of that one, Mark, but
love it. And the real MVP spotting another 30 for this one. Do we get 30 points for this one as well?
You do on the DeReal sports book. I don't know if the DeReal sports book survives very long in Vegas revenue wise.
Yes. See, if I could only watch 2 games in the first round, I'm going Michigan USC first, but that's my second choice by far. Yes. The other 2 games I can do without. Not that I'm not watching any college football game that's presented to me, but those are the 2 games to watch right there.
So do we think that semi of Tennessee, Georgia, and then what is it? You think that Michigan has a pretty good path to the semis? Obviously they get through USC. I think they could beat Clemson and get to the semis.
David, I think you could be looking at Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, Michigan.
I was just thinking that. Yep. I was thinking the same thing.
Double rematch in this one. Now, of course, one caveat, guys. Remember, this is based on what the Patreon community voters did this week. So, first of all, if you want to vote on it next week, you should join the Patreon community. But one big caveat on that is that some of these teams are still going to play each other. So we don't know what's going to happen when Michigan plays Ohio State, when Georgia plays Tennessee, when USC plays UCLA, when Ole Miss plays somebody with a pulse. It'll be interesting when TCU loses maybe a couple times.
Yeah, I see a couple of these names up here that won't be going anywhere, but I see a fair amount on this board that won't be there come December. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Ole Miss played Kentucky. Come on now.
That's and hey, and Kentucky with as we said, Kentucky with Will Levis is a good team.
Don't be disparaging the SEC. When you're making a disparaging remark and it is not true, I'm going to stand up for whatever conference because I am a lover of college football. Got to be true.
Can I make a case? I was going to say, if Southern Cal wins the Pac-12 and beats an undefeated UCLA team and then wins the Pac-12 title game, what if Clemson loses a game? Wouldn't that still be more? Would a one-loss USC Pac-12 champion be more impressive than a one-loss Clemson champion?
So I think, David, I think you could be right, but I think that USC rebuilding and Clemson having spent the last decade in a position of strength, that we would USC would probably get shafted in that.
Well, what I'm making the case is that the Pac-12 right now is a better conference than the ACC.
I think you're right.
I mean, I don't.
What do you guys
Mark,
think?
is that
I
close?
think he's right.
I think the top 5 teams in the Pac-12 are as solid as a collective as everyone except for the SEC.
And David, LBC's done some actually really interesting calculations on this. Looking at LBC and Tim actually a couple weeks ago did a thing looking at like the top 7 teams of each conference, and LBC and Tim both showed like really how strong like that conference has become, which is really a remarkable 1-year turnaround conference wide.
Imagine it's amazing what a little bit of coaching will do, and apparently now Chip Kelly has recruited enough recruiting seasons that he has a team that he can play with, but they're razor thin.
Well, he's got a quarterback too.
Well, yeah, 5th-year DTR is not 3rd-year or 2nd-year DTR. He made a big leap last year, and he made just as big a leap this year. That guy, we were talking about that Ole Miss UCLA game. That's the guy, and remember, that would be in Pasadena. That's the guy that would make that game competitive. And UCLA has a tricky. They don't have the best secondary, but they've got a really good pass rush. If you watch that game, they got one of the best pass rushers in the nation. Latu from the transfer from Washington. That guy's a beast. He will be playing in the NFL if he gets cleared for his neck injury.
Hold on, guys, real quick. Mike, good friend of the show who just called in, has made a comment that I think you guys are going to have fun with. He says, I think top of the 2 conferences are comparable, but Pac has 0 depth. So Pac compared to the Big Ten as far as depth goes. The conference with Michigan State, trash Wisconsin, the entire trash West, the conference of Iowa,
Nebraska,
the conference of Penn State,
Hey,
Nebraska.
Those teams be playing that are comparably seeded in the Pac-12.
Didn't Northwestern lose to some junior colleges this year?
Yeah,
hey, why?
Northwestern's the worst team in the conference.
Why can't we make the
They're
case for?
Colorado?
Good. I'm sorry, Mark.
Northwestern is Colorado, so
Yeah,
they cancel each other out. But these teams are looking bad against other teams in the Big Ten. Wisconsin and Michigan State, who lost to Pac-12 teams, have shown that they can't beat any Big Ten teams either.
Yeah.
They're in the Big Ten.
Mark,
some of the big. I feel like some of the Big Ten, though. Mark, tell me if I'm wrong in this. Some of the Big Ten is just a struggle because statistically somebody has to win.
Well, yeah. Well, that goes back to the argument that every conference is the same because within conference play, they're all 500. So somebody has to beat somebody. So I've always felt from a perception standpoint that when there's a league like the ACC has been the last 7 or 8 years where Clemson just crushes everybody else, that is not a good look because Clemson and then nobody else looks any good. And then on the flip side, when you've got a conference like the Pac-12 has been many times where the best teams like 9-3 and then wins a conference championship game and they're 10-3, and you've got teams that beat each other too much. There's too much parity that doesn't look good, and that the Big Ten has looked good in the SEC because they usually have 1 or 2 elites, and then they've got this quadrant of 3 or 4 9-4
really good
teams, and that looks good because people don't look at the bottom of the conference; they look at the top of the conference. So if there's one dominant team, that doesn't look good, but if you've got 4, 5 top 15 to 20 teams, that looks good. But Tony, you make total sense. And I say it all the time. The math says that every conference is the same. Just how is it structured within the conference? So that's why the out-of-conference games are so meaningful. And my only point there was that Michigan State and Wisconsin lost to Pac-12 teams at a point in which we thought Wisconsin and Michigan State were going to be viable teams in the Big Ten, but they're not.
But
Yeah,
that's the
I
same
just
thing
say
we can
I was-
say. Well, if I could add,
Go ahead.
that's what we were saying about Washington State, who Utah obliterated, and USC handled fairly easily as well. So I agree. We can go both ways on that. It's like, you're right, but they did. You know, our middle of the road team beat, you know, Wisconsin is very bad. You know, but it's not like Wisconsin's running the Pac-12. I mean, sorry, it's not like Washington State's running the Pac-12.
Sure. But Wisconsin and Michigan State have not won any games in the Big Ten except for playing each other. They are 0-6.
Well, Washington State just lost to Oregon State.
Northwestern.
I mean, I'm trying to think, who has Washington State beaten in the Pac-12?
Well, they
They
played
lost
Oregon
State. They
down to
lost
the wire.
Huh?
They did play Oregon down to the wire.
Yeah,
That was a good game. You're right.
that was a great game.
Can I just say I was out on Michigan State early? I told Mark this, and as Mark's
were.
Ohio State people told him, Mel Tucker's entire contract is owed to Kenneth Walker. In fact,
Yeah.
I think he should try to filter some cash to Kenneth Walker, who basically won him 3 or 4 games last year. The running
They
back.
lost linemen too, didn't they? I thought they lost more than just Kenneth Walker last year. I mean, they're not the
Right.
only team.
But he was kind of like a one-man band last year almost, Tim.
No, he's amazing, isn't he? Right?
Yeah.
Anyone losing a running back like that, of course you're going to take a step back.
And, you know, his ability to raid the transfer portal and kind of build up that roster again was going to be difficult. I expected them to take a step back. The program that really I thought would just be solid and always turns out just kind of solid is Wisconsin. I think that's the team that really took. But, hey, no credit here for the Fighting Brett Bielmas in Illinois. I mean, no love there. I mean,
all defense, no offense. I mean, they got a great defense.
They have the number 1 rusher in the country.
Would you say they have a good offense?
2022.
Would you say they have a good offense?
Comparable to whom? I think they have a decent offense. I think they have an average offense.
An average, okay. And a very good defense.
Yeah.
Mark, are you convinced they win the West, or are you leaning Purdue?
I tend to like Purdue there. Although
You're a big
Illinois
Aiden
does play
O'Connell
better
guy, I know.
defense.
And hey, real quick, thanks to Brian for helping out the channel. Brian with a super chat there. He says he thinks Michigan and OSU would crush the Pac. I think
I agree.
Brian.
Okay,
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree. Yeah, I think all in favor. Aye. All opposed. Say nay. The ayes have it. Guys carry.
Who would want to see Ohio State or Michigan play USC though?
It'll be a fun game. And you know, guys, sometimes that might surprise you. It might surprise you.
And gentlemen, in 2 years, once we get you guys in the West where we need you to be,
salvage that West.
Well, it would definitely help. I mean, because basically what we're at is Ohio State and Michigan fighting for the right to play USC in a game. Where have I heard that before? It was called the 70s.
I would like to see that, because we got to remember this is 1 year away from USC before. We were 4-8 last year. This is 1 year. Lincoln Riley
1 year from 4-8.
I want to see what Lincoln Riley can do with a recruiting class. And can you imagine? So he came in on name alone from Oklahoma. Now he's shown what he could do at USC. Let's say we go 10-2, 11-1. I don't think there's anyone here that doesn't think he's going to grab a bunch of linemen from the portal, and we already have a great recruiting class going. So I'm excited for us being in the Big Ten in about 2 or 3 years. And then maybe 2 years down the road, then I think we will be able to play head-to-head with Ohio State and Michigan.
And on that note, guys, our friend D-Rock Irish is in the chat. D-Rock Irish, your boys, we're sorry you got lost in the woods the other day as the Stanford trees took you down. Wow. Guys, is Notre Dame going to be able to get themselves back to playoff consideration? I mean, looking at a bracket like this, let's think about what it's going to take for Notre Dame to be able to get one of those top. And remember, Notre Dame is only competing for those at-large spots.
He's recruiting lights out.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
So what was it going to take? He needs to hold on to that recruiting class. People are, again, this is a the transfer portal age. What would USC's team look like without Caleb Williams this year? Who knows, right? So to do what Riley did this year in 1 year, I think it's unfair to expect other schools to do exactly that same thing. You know, it was a huge surprise though, because I mean, it's not like the cupboard was bare. But one thing I've always talked about with Brian Kelly is the fact, why could that guy never get a 5-star quarterback to Notre Dame? That is an indictment. I'm sorry.
Hey, Tim, can I add to that?
Sorry, 5-star quarterback. I'm sorry, a 5-star quarterback to Notre Dame.
I would say, and a lot of Notre Dame fans would probably say this, I think Will would probably say this, Marcus needs to find like an innovative offensive mind to run his offense. It comes back down to that. That's how you're going to attract a quarterback, is if you can find an offensive coordinator that can groom one and develop them. I mean, I think Penn State is kind of seeing the same thing right now. James Franklin post Joe Moorhead, who ran his best offenses, you know, in 16 and 17, when you don't have a good offensive mind running your staff, especially because Freeman is a defensive guy, I don't think that necessarily helps the cause here.
Yeah, great points. Well, they have Carr coming in 2024, but they're going to need to pull someone.
He's awesome.
Because there's nobody they have on their and on their team is going to be able to get them to the next level. With we've proven. Look at all these top teams we see here. Then think about their quarterbacks. Just glance at all the teams on here, right?
Yeah.
And the vast majority of them have superior quarterback play. And that's why they're there.
Guys,
not the only reason, but
I have a comment. I have a comment going back to Michigan. I'm not sold on Michigan. You take a look, they've played 2 road games at Indiana and at Iowa. And there's been enough jokes of Iowa. I don't need to bring up another one. Yes, it is a tough team to play against, but this year, not really. And they're going to play at Michigan. I think they play Michigan State at home in Ann Arbor, I believe.
Yep.
Mark, can you correct me?
Yeah, it's in Ann Arbor. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, hey, they got Penn State at home. Penn State with Sean Clifford. Sorry. Now, Michigan might be a great team, but let's see them play somebody. Right. Plus, Michigan's going to play 8 home games and 4 road games. And if this year, the next best game they're going to play is at the end of the year, Ohio State. That's pretty much it. Let's see how Penn State does the rest of the year. But I'm not really sold. Yeah, well, that's all I'm saying is that what do we know what Michigan is? They're going to play one team this year, possibly.
Yeah, they haven't played anyone, but who they had on their schedule, they handled the way a damn good team's going to do it. And I got 2 reasons: Blake Corum and that defense. So I mean.
Yeah,
that right there, I know they're a solid team. They're not a pretender.
I also
but do they travel? Can they travel? How are they going to play on the road? Are they going to have a true road test this year?
Having a good run game helps on the road, right? It silences
I think they're getting a serious road test in the horseshoe.
Yeah,
I would hope so.
We're going to see.
We're gonna see that, and that's one of the things, guys. One of the things it's really we love looking at this playoff bracket, because it gives us a sense of what's to come. And I think that's really exciting, because this is great football. I mean, I think with, 1 or 2 exceptions in the chat, people are pretty universal that this is something that they think they would be really exciting. But we know that some of this is going to morph and change a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I would add this, and I don't want to throw any plaudits to a team that Ohio State fans call the team up north. But I mean, and I heard Mark today on our good friend Mr. Steve Dace's program, and I don't think that Penn State was a legitimate, let's say, top 10 team, but I do think that they're probably about a top 20 to top 25 team. And I would say this for them.
That's probably safe.
To crush them the way they did, I still think says something. I mean, because that game wasn't even close, to be fair to them. They did crush a top 20 to top 25 team, which I think is a solid statement for them. I would say I think that I do think you need to see a little bit more out of their passing game. I think that I'm not quite sold on it yet. I think it's a good passing game, but I don't know if it's quite good enough to where it needs to be. I mean, we'll find out late November.
Well, and I'll tell you, David, you bring up an interesting point. So I used to have a doctor in LA that I knew was a neighbor of a friend of mine who was actually did one of the computer polls for the BCS. Okay. And one of the things that he talked about that he very much believed in is the idea that we need to re-look at teams' wins and losses as the season moves on.
Yeah.
Because I'll give you an example. We all had a field day laughing at Kansas State losing to Tulane. Right now, Kansas State is undefeated except for that Tulane loss. And Tulane is a great team. We're now finding out. Same with UCLA and South Alabama. And so I'm always a supporter of looking at games like Penn State at the end of the year and saying, okay, was that a really good team or not? Like with Michigan State, Washington. We thought Washington was a powerhouse, or thought Michigan State was going to be a powerhouse. Turned out they're really having some struggles. My dad's a Spartan. Sorry, Dad. But I think that we have to constantly look at both, because I do believe when a game is a big game and everything's on the line, like you have to kind of say, okay, what was the team ranked at the time, and what do we think they are now, and actually kind of combine those in how we look at their history. Make it a little gray.
We also have to be careful when we start to mix Power 5 and Group of 5 team comparison.
Very true. Very true.
South Alabama, they're having a great season. Good for them. And they did go out to UCLA. And I think, like Tony was talking about earlier, we can evaluate that game differently today and give South Alabama a ton of credit for playing a legitimately good team, top 15 team in the country. However, the Power 5 beats the Group of 5 like 85 to 90% of the time each season. And, the Louisville UCF game, I think that's a good example. Louisville is one of the worst Power 5 teams in the country. They're like in the bottom 10. They took on UCF, who's playing in arguably the best Group of 5 conference and is one of the better teams. They win that game, and they win it on the road. There's really no comparison. So when we talk about Michigan State being horrible, that's in the context of what they're expected to be and versus the Big Ten or versus the Power 5. If Michigan State played South Alabama on Saturday, I know who I would expect to win that game.
You're definitely right.
To add to Tony's comment, I tend to agree with you. I didn't think Notre Dame was a top 5 team at the beginning of the year, but obviously it would have only helped Ohio State if they had their season unfolded differently and they went on to at least be a 9-3, if not a 10-2 football team, which is not going to be the case.
So our buddy Jason in the chat here, and I respect this comment, but I don't think it's much substantiated. UCF would bash Louisville if they played now. What? How do we know that? They played like 4 weeks ago. I don't know that anything has happened to these two teams that would indicate to me that UCF would just suddenly bash Louisville. So I tend to take the results for what they are for the most part. I do think that there are arguments to be made to say this team has substantially improved over the last 6 weeks. This team has regressed. This team was injured. This quarterback was injured, and to make that part of the conversation. But, we heard that all last season with Ohio State and Oregon, as Oregon kind of floundered and faltered a little bit, but they continue to win games. All we heard was, well, Ohio State would kill them today. Maybe, but they didn't, and they played, and Oregon should be credited with that win, especially in Columbus. So, I think that's a big assumption to make.
Cool.
I tend to agree.
Well, thank you guys. Mark, we have been taking up your time for the top 25 that actually makes sense. How do your Patreon voters views compare to the top 25 that actually makes sense? Do they not make sense?
See this. I actually have to pull the top 25 that actually makes sense to make the comparison. But so I'm high on Tennessee. They are number 1. Georgia's 2. So that compares to Georgia at 1 and Tennessee at 5.
Well, remember actually, Mark, you weren't with us.
Oh,
Tennessee's actually 3 because of the seeding.
Gotcha. Yep. I have Ohio State at number 5. I've got Michigan 4, Ohio State 5, I believe. I don't have it memorized, and I don't have it in front of me. I do believe, yes, Michigan's 4, Ohio State's 5. Anyway, I don't want to try to recollect what I've got versus the Patreon standings here.
I think
you got a 3 mark.
12, so 11's pretty close.
Yeah, I think I've got USC at 11.
Oh, 11? Okay.
Would you say you had a 3 mark?
I've got Tennessee. Who am I missing? Georgia. I'm missing somebody in there. I'm gonna have to look it up. And that was part of our YouTube issue that my video was destroyed there. So
Did you have
it's been
TCU at 3,
reposted.
Mark?
Yeah. See, don't grill me on my own top 25 until I pull it up. I don't remember. Let's see here.
Are you guys a buyer in TCU? I
No.
wonder.
No, I think they're the Make-A-Wish kid.
Oh, wow.
I mean, TU's a great team, and Sonny Dykes is doing a phenomenal. Sonny Dykes should be like arguably coach of the year. I think with what he's done, I give all the credit in the world. When you look at their schedule, I don't think that they have. I don't think that they belong in the stratosphere with these teams.
Mm.
I'm a big buyer in
I'm not
Tennessee.
Michigan, Ohio. I mean, right now we're talking about TCU in terms of talking about Michigan and Georgia and Tennessee and Alabama. And I think that Alabama what would happen if Georgia or Alabama or Tennessee or Clemson or Ohio State or Michigan played TCU? I think it would be a bloodbath.
Well, let me ask you this.
And that's not to disrespect TCU.
Do you think that? So you think there's no chance TCU can get through the Big 12 undefeated, though? I mean, could they beat Texas? Could they beat and then win a title game? And
I don't think so.
Okay.
Could they? Yes. Most likely not.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I offered anybody who wanted to make a reasonable bet that I would put a UCLA temporary face tattoo on my face for one of our UCLA week big or pack show if TCU went undefeated, because they're not going to go undefeated. I don't think.
Okay.
I don't know. And that's, the Big 12 is a fun, exciting conference this year. So I don't know who gets them, but it's going to be probably a couple of somebody by the time we're done.
Well, I'd like to see that Texas TCU game right now. I
It'd be an
think
awesome game.
That would be a fun game to watch.
I think you're right.
I think that conference is interesting. I like
It really is.
So you
It's
have
exciting. It's good for the game.
You have Syracuse at 9. I find that interesting.
They've been plummeting.
Okay.
They've been plummeting in my rankings. So again, people need to understand in the chat, these are not who I believe are the best teams in the country, 1 through 25. These are the best resumes in the country. So Alabama is not the 8th best team in the country. They're better than that. Ohio State is not the 6th best team in the country. They're better than that. And Syracuse is not the 9th best team in the country. They are not that good. Again, this is based on resume. This is my best shot at performance, opponents, and results. You put those together, and that's what we see there.
Well, and Mark, one of the things that I love about your top 25 that actually makes sense, and we've talked about this before, is that you, as the season wears on, the voters finally, I think, start to catch up with what you're doing, and you start to see some alignment, which we're starting to see. And there's always a pretty good case that that this is arguably a better way than what they're doing in any of the other polls.
Yeah, why not give teams credit for winning games and performing well early in the season, and not assume that they're going to be the team that we expected them to be? Just allow the results to drive the rankings, not the perception drive the rankings.
So much good college football left. I can't wait for that. That Ole Miss Alabama matchup and that Tennessee Georgia matchup should be really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
David, have you taken a look at
TCU right
TCU's
there.
David, have you taken a
it's
look
difficult.
at TCU's ranking? Yeah.
Yeah,
they
I
played
saw it.
6 games without and at West Virginia. So they're 3, and they play Kansas State this weekend at home. So, hey, if they can go undefeated, God bless them. Then they deserve it. But I just see them losing at least one game in this next 6. What do I know?
And again, I think, what do you guys think? Sonny Dykes is definitely should be a serious consideration for Coach of the Year, because I think he's done an amazing job.
Duggan's amazing, man. So I mean, I think that Baylor 2022 is not Baylor 2021, so they're not exactly world beaters. I could see TCU doing that.
I think they could beat West Virginia. I think that's that's obviously a very, very winnable game.
Yeah. So I mean, it really comes down to Texas, I think, Tony.
Yeah, that's the team right now. I think that gets them.
Yep.
I think Texas with with Ewers is. I mean, imagine if he'd been healthy the entire year. If he'd been able to finish that Alabama game, talk about changing the face of this, both of these top 25s and maybe the AP poll as well. I mean, that would have been a huge difference in this.
Not to mention Bijan at running back has got to be one of the top 4 or 5 running backs in college football.
Well, and the name escapes me, but their receiver, their big tall receiver, that guy could start on any team in the country.
Was it
Worthy.
Xavier?
Yeah,
Worthy.
Yep.
I mean, those three are among of any trinity you have out there. Those three are right there as well. So,
I would guess that TCU is still going to lose 2 games this year.
Could you see them
Don't
in the Big
forget
12
about Lance
title game?
Leipold for
Sure.
Okay.
But to Tim's point, it's not that if you took TCU against every team on its schedule, they can win every game. But just the odds of them collectively getting through all of that is just
agreed.
Astronomical. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing, guys, Oklahoma State took a loss in a heck of a game, but they still have a pretty good team. I would not be surprised if we see Oklahoma State continue to do well. And the other one that has been sort of my dark horse that everyone laughs at me for saying is, and Josh Pate agrees with this very much, is a Quinn Ewers continuing to improve every week with Texas. I wouldn't count Texas out to continue storming through that conference.
Well, it's the most talented team in the conference, and he's the most talented quarterback and maybe the best quarterback, as well as the most talented, even within a short career of 3 or 4 games, has probably become the best quarterback in the conference already. Yep.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I actually think there's a lot of really good football left, but we shall see. Hey, gentlemen, it was a pleasure being on with you guys. A pleasure to talk to Mark Rogers. Mark, you're going to do still do the show, the top 25?
Yeah, we're going to carry this through for a while. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you guys. I'll be seeing you guys for the Pac-12 show later in the week, right?
I will look forward to it.
Wednesday, 7:30.
There's some good games this week.
Excellent. We'll talk about it. Take care, guys.
All right. Well, Mark, we appreciate the chance to sort of be the fill-ins here. This was a lot of fun.
No, I appreciate you guys carrying this thing for this long. So thank you.
All right. Good luck, guys. And everybody, if you get a chance, tune in tomorrow night. We're going to have our Pac-12 live show, which is going to be a lot of fun. And Thursday night, a very special USC pregame show with the USC Trojan set up by LBC. We're going to have the Trojan himself.
Come join us. Mark,
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
We need everybody in the chat to take notice of that. We're going to promote that as much as we possibly can. So let people know out there that don't normally join us that Thursday. And do we have a specific time yet, Tony?
7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern.
Okay. There we go.
And
Great
we're
stuff.
very thankful for the USC drum major, the Trojan, for joining us. It's USC's bye week, so it works out perfectly. Believe it or not, these guys in the band probably work just as hard and spend as many hours as D1 athletes practicing and performing. So it's pretty incredible. We'll get to hear Jacobo Herrera's story, how he chose USC and how he became a band member and then become a drum major. So it'll be pretty cool.
Fight on, everybody. Thanks, Mark.
Bye, guys.
Tim, Tony, Rick, thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate that. Right, folks. If we can do that, there we go. And again, my thanks to Tim, Tony, and Rick. Those boys can host a show, and they do a phenomenal job, and they filled in for me nicely. So thank you so much for that. We will look at the top 25 that actually makes sense, but I certainly want everyone to be able to comment on whatever you want to, since we're already this deep into the show. So I'll just bring it up one time in regards to the top 25 to give everybody another look at it, because we actually had an issue where this video and about 11 others have been deleted. So hopefully they'll be restored. I was working with YouTube, and they've done a nice job of hopefully restoring all those videos. They were able to find them and again, hopefully restore those. So everything from over the weekend in regards to, we had a Michigan Penn State analysis video with thanks to you, about 18,000 views. That was taken off, and all sorts of videos taken down between live streams and also video posts. So those are hopefully, again, going to be restored here in the next day or two. But in the meantime, I reposted the top 25 that actually makes sense, and did that a few hours ago. So let's give it a quick glance, and then we'll take some calls. So here we go. I know that's a bit scary. You have to see me twice. I know that's tough to deal with, but here we go. Okay, so that's roughly our top 10 right there, with Tennessee, Clemson, Georgia, Michigan, Ole Miss, Ohio State, TCU, Bama, Syracuse. And now, again, we can talk anything on your mind concerning college football, but if you'd like to address the top 25 that actually makes sense, I will scroll through it so everybody can check it out again. And again, it is reposted on the channel, so you can check it out if you've got another tab open. So let's go to the lines and bring in Chris. Chris, how you doing tonight?
Fine. How are you?
Sure.
Oh, just thought I had to wait a long time. That's okay. It doesn't bother me. I actually kind of like sitting back and hearing what some of the people have to say, but I get a little upset, Mark. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't, but you know, some of the things that are discussed, and maybe I just take things too personal. I don't know. I'm kind of a sensitive guy, but one thing, you know, and it's not a criticism of you. I hope it doesn't come across as being critical of you. I don't have an ill opinion of you at all. I think you're a wonderful guy, and I hope you know I'm not just saying that to, you know, earn your trust or whatever. But like, just one thing, I guess, for example, you know, it's just my opinion, Mark. So if it upsets you, I apologize in advance. But you know, for example, one thing they talked about. I don't know if you were on the conversation when it was being discussed, but how Tulane was this wonderful, exceptional team. And, you know, actually I have them kind of on the outside of I mean, through my math or whatever, the process that I use, it's not really me that does it. And I don't want to get into all that again, but they're right outside of the top 25. But so they're really not. I actually kind of consider the top 25 the cream of the crop. And so whenever, and I'm obviously, I try to include everybody only because I want to make it sure that people know that I'm not like just making up a list that maybe of teams that I think are good. But one difference, I guess, between mine, not that mine's any better than yours, but for example, and I don't remember the exact order. I think you have a Kentucky in there somewhere pretty high, and I actually have them in there as well. But they're on a fringe, though. I mean, Kentucky's almost outside, and I don't want to like pick on them either, but
I've got them at 21.
Okay, well that's a good ranking for them. That's fine, I guess. But I think I have them at 25, and it's not because I think that they're any better than that. But you know, actually for me, and I don't know if I've told you this or not, and it's just something to think about. It's not that I know any better, but actually, kind of where I define good is like the really good is it's by my rating. It's if they can get a 70 in my rating, that's really good. And now that actually for teams that so that actually limits it to, I think, around top 20 maybe. And I don't know if you have my list in front of you, but I think it includes up to number 20 or something like that. I know one of the teams that you don't have on there that I think should probably be on there is Cincinnati. And again, it's not because I don't know exactly what you use. I get put your list together, but I think that might be qualify as an oversight if you're not including Cincinnati in there somewhere. And I don't know if it's that I prejudiced it. I don't know if I'm prejudicing it against, you know, I know there's a difference, and I agree with you on a lot of what you say, but I don't know how big the gap is between. You seem to think it's a lot bigger, I guess, than I do between G5 and P5. I mean, that would explain why you might not want to include a Cincinnati or I don't know who else, maybe like even James Madison, even though I think you had James Madison last week though, but I think I still have James Madison in my top 25, even after losing. And I'll try to explain why in simple terms. The conference as a whole, I think, is much better, I think, than people are actually trying to, I think one of the teams they talked about was South Alabama. Well, I don't think I have South Alabama in my 25, but it's the conference though that's so much better. It's not just James Madison's really good and nobody else is. I mean, that's why even after they lost, I think that why I still have them ranked, not real high, but high enough to where they're still kind of up in the, the top 25 anyway. I just was wondering what you thought about that.
The last time I ran the numbers on the group of 5 versus the power 5, I think the winning percentage for the power 5 was 88%.
It sounds about right.
So the one condition I'll put on that, which actually favors the group of 5, would be, I would guess that somewhere in the neighborhood of 85 to 90% of those games were played in Power 5 stadiums.
I don't know.
That's something to be considered.
I don't.
That the group of 5 is travel for most of those games.
I don't weigh that against it. So that, to me, that doesn't matter. I mean, I'm just telling you, that doesn't matter to me. But if it matters to you, I guess that's okay.
Yeah, it matters to me.
Okay.
Yes. If there's a game between Miami and Oregon, and they've got to play at Autzen Stadium in Eugene versus playing at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, I think it's a judgment call. We can't pin an exact point differential on it because we don't know. We can't take both teams and play in both stadiums and then weigh the results. But Vegas tells us that it is generally, and it depends on the venue, it is generally a 3-point difference.
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up because you know what? And this isn't to toot my own horn. Sometimes you probably get the impression that that's what I try to do. I have my own, and this is kind of what it is, and I know how to do, and that's basically what I think it is too. And that's without me even looking and consulting Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I don't know that that's just an accidental, but yeah, I agree with you on that.
So I guess if we take that 88%, and again, that was just one season. I remember a couple of years ago taking that 88% figure for the Power 5, and then we would evenly distribute home and away games. I would believe that, and it's pretty reasonable to say that winning percentage would drop, not considerably, but maybe down to 80%.
I guess I'm more of the philosophy that if you can't win, you don't get credit for. I mean, maybe that's not the right way to look at it, but if you can't,
I'm not giving credit to anyone who didn't win games. I'm just making the statement that I think is pretty reasonable. The chat can correct me here. That's pretty reasonable that if we have a collection of 100 games between the group of 5 and the Power 5, and 85 out of those 100 games are being played in Power 5 stadiums, but that was changed to 50-50, that some of those close games would go in the group of 5's favor. I'm not talking about a significant number, but I'm talking about that 88% being skewed by playing almost all those games in Power 5 stadiums.
Well, I guess I'm more of the philosophy, if you can't, I mean, maybe it would help, I guess, to have, it reminds me of kind of the argument I tried to make about the 1984 season. Washington State and Utah played each other that year, and they played in Pullman, I believe. And I think the final score was Washington State 42, Utah 40. Well, okay, play that game in Salt Lake City, it's probably flipped, right? Because of that point margin or whatever. So, I mean, you could say it's a wash, I guess, as far as maybe who might have, a neutral site maybe is a wash, but, the reality is what the...
Yes, we know what the reality is.
Well, that's my point.
This is the point. Let me try to state this one more time in a different way. I'm not trying to take away any wins from anyone to say, oh, well, if they would have played in their stadium, they would have lost the game. No, I never do that.
I think that's a good argument. I think there's truth to it, but I don't think it matters.
Absolutely, it matters.
Well, just like I said, the argument I just told you about, Utah, you played that same game in Salt Lake City. I think Utah beats Washington State, but so what? They didn't play in Salt Lake City, so it doesn't matter, is kind of where I'm coming from on it.
But
So
we're
that's
talking
good.
about comparing. We're talking about comparing the Power Five and the Group of Five of which 85 to 90% of the games are played in.
Well, in what?
Okay, let's move on from that point.
No, it's okay. It's a good point to make. I just don't know what the result of it is. I mean, I don't know what we can draw from it other than the fact that they're playing all the
We can
games.
draw this from it. I am pretty reasonable in saying that if in fact the Power Five wins 88% of its games, and I'm just saying those are my findings. So I haven't tracked every game for the past decade. I've just taken years at a time. Let's say the Power Five wins 88% of the games against a Group of Five, that they would not win 88% of the games if they were not mostly played at Power Five stadiums.
Well, I agree, but I don't understand why it really matters, though. I'm not trying to argue with you, Mark. I just don't. That point doesn't really matter to me.
Because it changes results. And I'm not saying significantly, but it changes results. If you told a particular football team that they had to play all their games on the road next season, you can believe that they would not be quite as good.
Oh, sure. No, I agree. That's probably true.
I'm not saying Ohio State would suddenly finish in 10th place in the Big Ten. I'm just saying that they would have a more difficult time if they played every game on the road. And they're a bad example because they're an elite. If we took the middle of the pack, then those games could be swayed by home road status of the games.
Well, I hope that.
What's your next point?
That's not an indictment that there might be some kind of conspiracy at work where there's like people making, if that's the case, that's a problem, because if it's not a fair, if it's making the statement that the result isn't a fair result, then that's the one. I mean, maybe that's another reason why I kind of don't know that I agree, because I operate under the assumption, whether it's the right assumption or not, that at least at the very least that the game's called fairly. And if the result isn't fair, if there's like an unfair advantage, then that's a problem. That's something somebody needs to work on to fix. If the result isn't fair to either team, no matter what it is. I mean, if there's not that's why I don't understand why it should matter if you're playing them in your home stadium. I mean, yeah, you have an advantage, I guess, by being at home, but you can't change the result of it just because one team plays you maybe closer than you think they should.
No one's trying to change the result of the games. So let's get past that.
Well, then it doesn't matter then. It's kind of what I'm saying. It doesn't matter. If it's done fairly, then it shouldn't matter where they're playing it, is what I think.
Well, it's actually not done fairly, because the majority of the games between the Power Five and the Group of Five are played in Power Five stadiums. So actually, your point that you just made, I can push back on and say that's not a fair set of win-loss records, because they're not played 50-50 home and away.
Well, life isn't fair, though. I mean, I don't know. We could get into arguments on that too, but I think it's fair enough. I'm not going to go and change the results to fit.
I'm not changing results. I'm just stating a reasonable point that I think any reasonable college football fan would agree that the results of any team's schedule would be far different if they had to play every game on the road or every game at home. Not every team in the country. Some of them are haphazard, and they actually play better on a particular season for some unknown reason, better on the road than they do at home. But that is the exception.
Well, there's a lot, I think, that goes into playing on the road versus playing at home. It's not just where you're playing. I mean, you have to travel, first of all. And then that's actually, but anyway, that's kind of one of my arguments against a playoff. Not that I want to make that the topic either, but one team gets to play at home, one gets to travel. That's not fair. That's why I don't know why people are so gung-ho about a playoff. The team that has to travel,
the proposed playoff system, correct?
Well, any playoff. Yeah, the proposed one.
Any playoff. They're currently at neutral sites.
Well, not exactly. Are you talking about the one that they're putting into place? I thought the whole idea was to play kind of like I guess if you're talking about the title games, those are played at neutral sites. And I know which ones you're talking about. Those are gonna supposedly happen at neutral sites, but like FCS teams, I'm almost positive they play it until the championship game anyway. They all have to travel. One team stays at home, one team has to travel.
Chris, how much do we talk about the FCS on this channel?
I don't know. Does it matter?
Zero is the answer.
Well, it's a playoff, though. It doesn't.
Not that I don't have respect for it, but no one here asks ever about the FCS. I've never produced an FCS video. You've brought it up. There's no reason for us to talk. When we talk about the playoff, we are talking about the college football playoff on the FBS level.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of good reasons, but if you don't want to hear what they are, I guess you could tune out to it, I guess. If you want to know how much that would make, I can tell you how much it would. Comparably, because I've done this.
I don't even know what we're talking about at this point, Chris. You have drifted off into like 18 different ways. Where are we now? What are we addressing?
Well, you choose the topic and I'll talk about it. That's fine. You pick.
No, I don't want to pick. I just want to know what we are focused on.
My point is,
let's choose one thing and we'll get through it and we'll move on to the next call.
Well, you pick it then. You pick it.
Since you made the call. I don't know what point you're trying to make.
Well, I could make. I think I already did make the point. I think the
point initially that you've got a great system. Okay, that's the point that you typically make every time you call.
Great system. I don't know that I ever said that.
Okay. The next point was that you said that we got into the whole group of five discussion because you said that I don't.
Well, no, that wasn't
group of five football.
Okay, all right. If you want, that's fair, I guess. If you want to bring that
correct?
Up.
Did I?
I wasn't. I don't know that I don't know that I was going to take it that direction. But yeah, I think you devalue, just like you said, you devalue the FCS. You devalue G5, which I guess.
Whoa. I don't devalue the FCS. You've made ridiculous comments in the past about having the FCS champion play the FBS champion. Like it would be a game.
That's not ridiculous.
That's ridiculous.
No, it's not.
It is completely ridiculous.
North Dakota State against Alabama for the champion?
Yes, it is completely ridiculous.
Why?
I would love to see the game myself, but we would have to have ambulances standing by. No.
Oh, come on. They were supposed to play. North Dakota State was supposed to play Oregon, I think, in the COVID season. They just didn't able to do it because it was canceled. I mean, come on. I mean, how much higher do they have to play before they're going to get some respect? They didn't play Oregon because I think they had to cancel the game.
Actually playing the game and winning the game are two different things, or being competitive in the game.
Well,
the FCS champion cannot play the FBS champion in a competitive game.
Why not?
Because they're not talented enough. They didn't receive scholarships to those schools for a reason.
Well, I mean, that's your opinion. I mean, I'm not going to.
It's not my opinion. It's fact. They did not receive scholarships to FBS schools. That doesn't mean I'm talking about every specific player. There are FCS players that go on and play in the NFL. I'm not talking about every single player. Talking about collectively. There's no comparison.
I guess that's one of the big objections I have with you, Mark. That's where you're prejudiced, is like I don't know why you can't look beyond just, I mean, it's cool that you like Ohio State and you think they're wonderful. And I mean,
it has nothing to do with Ohio State. Where are we going with this?
Well, all right.
There are two different levels. It would be like us saying that the minor league baseball champion should be playing the World Series champion for the World Championship.
I don't want to get into you about all that because that's just, you're making stuff up. I mean,
I'm making stuff up. That is a good comparison.
FCS
that is a legitimate comparison I just made.
Get your sports almanac out and look and tell me that FCS isn't Division I, and then if you can find it that way, I guess then you're right. But I'm not saying they play at the same level as that FBS is, but they're what we have is a separated, regardless of how wide that gap is, which I think it is pretty wide. We have two different champions for the same division. It's kind of stupid. You say I'm stupid. I think that's stupid.
I didn't say anyone was stupid.
No, you did.
You just made a statement that I've been talking about here for the last 3 minutes with you. You just said that the gap was wide.
It is.
Okay. Well, then you just said a few minutes ago that it wasn't, that the FCS champion should be playing the FBS champion.
You didn't let me finish my thought. Well, in 2014, you look it up if you don't believe me. That's fine. You don't have to believe me. In 2014, Texas.
Looking it up. Go ahead.
It doesn't matter to me if you do or don't. Texas A&M played Sam Houston State, and I think Sam Houston State played them pretty. I mean, it wasn't like 50-40, but it was like 35 to whatever. I mean, Sam Houston State played Texas A&M, pretty good Texas A&M team.
And
Team
Houston State
Alabama.
we don't have to go back to 2014. They played this season.
No, who did?
Texas A&M and Sam Houston. Did they not play this season?
I don't remember them playing. Did they play?
Let's see.
I guess I wasn't that closed in on it, but I'll look it up while you're talking to me, I guess. But I know North Dakota State lost to Arizona pretty bad, I guess. So that's to your point, I guess.
Yeah. Sam Houston State played Texas A&M this year. It was 31-0. So what?
Well, I was talking about 2014. I wasn't talking about 2022. But if you want to use 2022, I mean, is Sam Houston State as good as they were in 2014? I mean, you have to kind of wait.
No idea.
Well, I don't
have to tell me that. I don't follow Sam Houston State.
Okay, well,
I have no idea. I know that they're not good enough to play in the FBS.
Well, they do play. So it's like, that's not a very good point. They do play. So they're not good enough to play, but they do play. I mean, they might not win. I mean, you're making a good point there, I guess. But, and like I say, North Dakota State was supposed to play Oregon, and I know that game didn't happen, but I don't know how much better they have to be than Oregon to play, and they didn't play them, unfortunately, but that wasn't that long ago. That was like maybe I think it was the COVID season, if I'm not mistaken. And they, of course, they didn't play because of the.
Chris, we're going to move on to some other callers, but I at least want you to get some satisfaction out of this call. So what?
No, let me just have one more. Can I just say one last thing before you on me?
Hang on just a second. Let me make my statement, please. I want you to have a satisfying phone call. I want you to be satisfied when you get off the line here. So what point are you trying to make?
I've already kind of made it. I mean, the point I was trying.
Does anybody in the chat know what points have been made here? Because I don't know.
Toledo, okay? Toledo's a very good MAC team. They just are. I don't know. I don't have to argue about it and say, well, no, they're not. They aren't this and that. They are.
They're a good MAC team.
They're very good. They're very good. Not a good MAC team. They're a very good MAC team. Okay. And they played Ohio State this year. And I know
they lost by 8 touchdowns.
I know but they didn't quit. And, I know they got beat 77-21 or whatever it was. But, that's competitive, even if you might not agree with me. And I made a point.
Competitive.
Yes. And, I made that point with the Colorado-Nebraska game.
Is that competitive?
Yes, it is competitive because you're talking about teams.
Competitive in the fact that we had athletes on a field competing. But in terms of the scoreboard, that is not a competitive football. Does anybody believe that an 8-touchdown game is a competitive football?
Well, I was going to make another point. And if
it is, then every game's competitive.
Can I finish my thought?
Competitive
everywhere. The year that Colorado supposedly hammered Nebraska, right? 62-36 or something like that.
They did.
You know what that's roughly equivalent to? If you do like the math, it's roughly equivalent to beating them 3-2. By percentages, it's roughly beating them by 3-2, maybe 3.5-2 or something like that. But it's not a rout like everybody makes it sound like. Just because Colorado had 6 touchdowns or whatever it was, the percentage of it is roughly like beating them 3-2. So if we're gonna Colorado beat the crap out of Nebraska 62-36, it's like beating them 3-2.
I hate to say this, but it's the truth.
And
of asinine
okay, and Ohio State Toledo 8-2.
Be the worst.
No, 8-2. So Ohio State beat Toledo 8-2. Is that a rout? I don't know. I guess maybe, or 4-1.
I am going to declare it a rout. Okay.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Mark. And hope you have a nice day.
If not a rout, then a rout does not exist. Thanks, Chris. All right. I just want the man to make a point and to stay on one. I still don't. This has been, and Chris, I hope you're listening right now. You are welcome to call every show. And I hope, if nothing else, you appreciate that I give you time to talk. I don't know that you would be given this much time anywhere else, but given this much time to talk, I just never can pin you down to what point are you trying to make? I've never been able to do that because even when I ask that question, you can't answer it. All right, let's get on to a call that actually has a point to it. Michael, how you doing tonight?
Hey, a little bit under weather, but hanging in there, Mark, and yourself.
I am doing just fine.
Hey, I want to apologize for you getting hacked earlier, man. I wish there was something we could do to help you, but I hope you got it
Well,
straightened out.
it's okay. It's all right. And just some videos were deleted, and we've removed someone from access. So all is good. You just can't trust everyone. That's the way things are.
That is true. Actually, I don't have a disagreement with you. It's about your Big Ten power rankings. I can understand you having Purdue number 5, mainly because of Penn State beating them. But is it because of the close games this year?
So what would you have?
It was toss up. I would have had him maybe number 4. I think you had Penn State at 4, right?
Yeah, so
Or do
everybody
you have
out there,
Illinois at
we
4?
released Big Ten power rankings earlier, but those were deleted, and so I'll either repost it or YouTube is recovering my videos. So we'll get that back out. We've got Ohio State at 1, Michigan 2. So Michigan fans understand I did give that a lot of consideration and almost ranked Michigan number 1. So anyway, Ohio State 1, Michigan 2, Illinois 3, Penn State 4, and Purdue 5. Okay. So
now,
you're wanting Purdue where?
I was thinking maybe I agree with you, but I thought maybe as good as they've been playing lately, they might have been number 4. But
And
then again, I just realized it also.
Who would you drop?
I probably would have had Penn State 5, but then I also realized too Penn State did beat them, so and stuff like that. But my thing I'm trying to ask you is, if they keep winning, is there a chance they can crack the top 3?
Well, yes, absolutely.
All right. What would it? Okay, no, I was just wondering stuff like that. I have a feeling there's gonna be a lot of good football ahead and stuff like that. But with the Wisconsin game coming up and stuff like that, and it was 2003 the last time they beat Wisconsin. It's 19 years, but it's been 15 in a row for Wisconsin. Do you think Purdue will have to do something like they did last week against Nebraska, or maybe run the ball more like they did in the Minnesota game to get to win at Camp Randall?
Michael, didn't you ask me the same question last night or a couple of nights ago? Anyway,
Mark,
to run the ball. Can you give me a forecast? Is that what you're thinking about? Are you thinking this is
Mark?
related?
No. I was just wondering. No, you have to figure. Ignore the last time. I'm under the weather, so I'm not totally thinking rational.
Okay.
But no, I'm sorry, you checked the record and stuff. So, but no, I was just wondering. Like I said, when you got me calm down, I'm just so geeked for the game Saturday and stuff. But I was just wondering stuff like that. But with the Ohio State Iowa game, do you think it might be a game for maybe a quarter and a half, or do you think Iowa's going to get boat race from get go with their defense?
I believe that Iowa's going to stay in this game. And when I say stay in this game, I'm talking about not getting boat raced. I don't know if 17-3 in the first quarters in the game for an Iowa offense, it's obviously anemic, but I've got quite a bit of respect for Iowa in regards to the defense, and the special teams are exceptional. And there is a lot of pride in that football team and a lot of pride in that program. And I would not be surprised if they drag that into some kind of dogfight for a half. Or more.
That's what I'm thinking. Now, what about Penn State and Minnesota? Do you think Minnesota can bounce back, or do you think Penn State's just going to unleash fury on Minnesota for what happened last week?
That's an interesting game between two teams that expected a little bit more. And Penn State's only lost the one game, but they haven't played well recently. And of course, that one loss against Michigan was a poor performance. And Minnesota's lost 2 key Big Ten Western Division games at a time in which they looked like the best team in the division the first 4 weeks of the season. So yeah, that's a must win for 2 teams, especially Minnesota. So, Penn State's in position to possibly still play for the Eastern Division. Now, based on how they performed last week, I don't think anyone thinks that Penn State is up to beating Ohio State and winning the rest of its games to win the Big Ten Eastern Division, but mathematically it's still right there for them. Minnesota's obviously lost 2 games to the 2 top teams in the division, so they're hurting in regards to tiebreakers, but still 2 losses in the conference. They're still playing, but the loser's basically done. The winner is still in survival mode. It's a fascinating game, and the health of Tanner Morgan, unfortunately, is really in question here, whether he's going to be able to go.
Mm-hmm. Now, Syracuse goes on to Clemson Saturday, right?
Yes.
Now, I can't remember where you had. I think you had what? Clemson 4th in your poll.
2.
2. And where'd you have Syracuse? Like 10th or 11th, I think.
9.
All right. Now, there's a chance that Syracuse it'd be an interesting game, and if so, do you see them cracking the top 5, maybe, in your poll, or do you think it's going to depend on how they play Saturday?
Wins this game.
Yes.
If they're undefeated and they beat Clemson, Purdue, and North Carolina State, shoot, they might be. Again, you asked me these questions, Michael, and I appreciate it, but kind of in a vacuum. It all depends on what all these other teams do. But yeah, they would be somewhere in the top 5, I would think, with that resume.
No, the only thing I'm trying to figure out, are they in the same division? Are they like different divisions of the ACC?
They're in the same division.
All right, so basically, it's an elimination game this weekend.
Yes.
All right, just wondering stuff like that. No.
Well, put it this way: the loser of the game would need the other team to lose twice.
Yep. Not bad. I was just wondering. All right, Mark, I'm glad you got things worked out. Thanks for taking my call. I'll try to come down and relax before Saturday.
Well, enjoy the game, Michael, and hopefully we'll talk to you before that.
Oh, you will. Take care, Mark. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael.
See ya.
All right. We saw a request or 2 in the chat for people that want to join the show. So there you go. We have just actually, we are simulcasting on Facebook. I didn't realize that, even though I was the one who designated that. We used to simulcast from time to time on Facebook, and we need to expand on Facebook. I'm going to drop the link to our Facebook page here at the Voice of College Football. We would love if everyone joined us on YouTube, because that's where we gain ad revenue. But just think about the universe of people on Facebook and how we could draw them in as well. So we are simulcasting tonight on Facebook, and also I'm going to drop the link to our Facebook offering there at the Voice of College Football for everyone to like us on Facebook, follow us on Facebook as well. All right, next up, we got Sean on the line. Sean, what's going on? Hey, Sean. Hello, Sean. You there?
Hey, can you hear me okay, Mark?
Sean, I got you now.
Yes.
How's it going?
I'm sorry, I had it on mute. I didn't realize that.
All right.
Hey, it's kind of hard to follow up Chris there. He's an interesting character. It almost feels like like the Bob and Tom show, when they have on a guy that is like kind of a fake guy. But some of the thoughts that he has is very, very interesting, that's for sure. So real quick, one thing that, and I'm an Ohio State fan in the Dayton area, but one question for you. If we removed the name from Alabama and we had a team that had a similar record to them, with the idea that they really should have lost a couple of games, would they really be ranked as high as what Alabama is ranked today?
Which is what are they, number 5, 6? I don't know what they're ranked.
Yeah, I think it's between 5 and 6.
Okay. Well, we got to understand, not only did Alabama win those games close, look at who they lost to and in what manner, and look at that setting. And now we're considering Tennessee a top 3 team in the country, and I've got them number 1. Again, I don't believe they're the best team in the country necessarily, but I've got them ranked at number 1. So for as much criticism as Alabama has taken, and I will include myself because I don't think that they outplayed Texas. I think they outplayed Texas A&M, but they still found themselves in a one-score game in which Texas A&M could have won the game with a pass into the end zone. That we also have to understand that now that they've lost a game, that game was against one of the 4, 5, 6 best teams in the country and in a raucous environment, and they lost it on a field goal on the last play of the game.
Yeah, well, I understand the Tennessee one. I just personally it's hard for me to get over the idea that they should have lost, or I mean should have, but they could have lost to Texas A&M, and they could have lost, and if Quinn Ewers wasn't hurt, like they went against Texas second string guy, and they barely won, and there was a lot of really interesting calls. I'm not saying I'm not a fan of either team. So
yeah,
I just think that there was I don't know. I just kind of feel like if I'm an Alabama fan this year, I would not just say, oh, they're gonna win the rest of their games. I really don't think they are. I just don't think I don't know if they're gelling together as a team.
Yeah.
And I think that's an issue. I know like Ohio State kind of had that issue in 2015. Like we couldn't gel together, and it looks like they're having similar issues coming off of the Heisman campaign with the quarterback there, and then it's just their defense is not gelling like we all thought it was going to. So I don't know. That was just kind of a gut reaction that I had.
Sure.
Seeing a lot of people ranking on 5th. It's like, is that just an SEC bias for Bama, or?
Yes, it is. Not completely, but there's some bias there. So none of us can vote. None of us can rank teams without knowing exactly the team, the tradition, whether we like them, dislike them. And for as much as we take ourselves, if we do, some people just rank teams and they don't even try to hide or correct their bias. I certainly do. But I have always admitted on here that everyone has bias, including myself. I try to negate that. I do my very best to negate it, but it's impossible to get past. We're humans.
Yeah.
So there is a bias for Alabama. There's bias against Alabama, but I would believe that most of the voters would vote with bias for Alabama because of the track record. It's obvious. But at the same time, I think we should remember, Sean, that if you look at the top 10 teams in the nation, according to my rankings, we can note that Tennessee went to overtime against Pitt, that Clemson went to double overtime against Wake Forest, that Georgia should have lost a game against Missouri on the road, and on and on. We can go through a lot of those teams and we can point out games. Number 10, UCLA lost to South Alabama, or defeated South Alabama on a last-second field goal. So everyone's going to play close games. And remember that Alabama came within 4 minutes of winning the national championship last year, and they should have lost to LSU. They should have lost to Auburn. They did lose to Texas A&M. They could have lost to Arkansas.
Yeah, I understand it. I think when I think of like teams though, like Oklahoma in the past, I know that there was a year, this was maybe a couple of years ago, where they were playing a lot of close games, and they were getting just killed for it in the rankings, but they were undefeated. But my question is, it seems to me, I mean, this Alabama situation is similar to that, but I think too, it's just the way this year's been with how many teams have played close. And it just, there really is no teams that we know of yet that are just, the team to beat, and or the 2 teams to beat, or 3 teams. We kind of thought it was Bama, Ohio State, and Georgia, but now it's looking like that they're not as great as we thought in the first couple of weeks in the season. So at least Georgia and some of these other teams, and it's one thing I'm interested in hearing is, Tennessee, I think they're a good team. I'm not confident in calling them like a champion, because they have similar issues that Ohio State's had in the past, where I think their pass defense is ranked in the hundreds. And I just don't know of I just don't think a championship team can be that bad on one side of the ball. I mean, you can win a game here or there, but I don't know. But and then
wait a minute. Who's in the hundreds in pass defense?
Am I right or wrong? I mean, I heard that, I think, on the Zach Smith show, the Men of the Sports. Tennessee.
Okay.
Is
so
that true?
Understand that when we talk about pass defense and we talk about yardage given up per game. So, for example, going into the Michigan game, Penn State was, I believe, last. They were certainly in the bottom 5 in the nation in pass defense. No, they were like 103 in traditional pass defense, which means they gave up 262 yards per game passing. But if you looked at pass efficiency, they were 7th in the nation in pass efficiency. They had only given up 5 touchdown passes and 5 interceptions. So in what I consider to be more valid statistics, Penn State had an exceptional pass defense. The reason they had given up 262 yards per game is because they had given up more pass attempts than any team in the country. So I'm not a big believer in this yardage totals just on face value.
Okay. Do you know where Tennessee's ranked in pass efficiency?
Let's see here. I got it right.
And I can't see that being an issue where, for instance, like Ohio State, they go up by a lot of points, so teams are gonna throw the ball more on them.
Yep.
Like that's a big deal. But I do know that I think Tennessee, how many teams have they really blown out? I'm not really sure. But I'm interested to hear what you have to say on that, the pass efficiency.
Tennessee is 63rd in pass efficiency.
So yeah, I know what it's like having a great offense, but then not having a defense. So I've seen that kind of before, where you can win a game, but can you go through the gauntlet? I'm not sure that they can. I think it's exciting right now, but we will see by the end of the year. The other thing I wanted to say, 2 weeks ago, I got to go up to Michigan State for the game, and I want to compliment all the Michigan State fans. They were so nice, and my kid and my kid saying we don't give a damn for the whole state of Michigan at the beginning of the season. We had a blast. We got invited to some tailgates, Michigan State guys, and they were so super fun. And they were actually kind of like excited in the sense that they wanted us to beat Michigan as bad as they want to beat Michigan. So it was definitely a team effort, and I just want to compliment their fans and thank them for a great trip.
All right, very cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sean.
Have a great
Appreciate
day.
you being here. Have a good night. All right, next up here at the Voice of College Football, concerning the top 25 that actually makes sense, or anything else you want to talk about in college football, we've got Will, whose team is not in this week's top 25 that actually makes sense. Maybe if we expand to 75, we can get Notre Dame in there.
Harsh.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Mark, I was also going to talk about the top 25 that actually makes sense. I'm going to defend Tennessee a bit with what Sean said, because they get ahead of teams like Ohio State, so they have to so teams kind of have to pass against them to try to get back into it. I'm not saying Tennessee, I don't think Tennessee's going to beat Georgia, but I think they'll give them a game. Don't you think, Mark? Or do you think they'll get exposed like Michigan State did after beating Michigan against another top team?
Oh, when Michigan State beat Michigan last year,
Yeah.
and Ohio State drilled them.
Do you think it's the same thing with Tennessee, or
I don't. No. This Tennessee team's more talented than that Michigan State team. They're better, but I do think we need to understand that Tennessee was riding a huge wave of momentum and crowd, and that's a spectacle. They were really gearing up for that game. To their credit, Alabama gets that gift of a touchdown with about 5 minutes left, that scoop and score on the missed exchange, and Tennessee didn't fold. They came back, they tied the game, and then, of course, the last minute or so was crazy. But, yeah, Tennessee's, they've got to go to Athens to play Georgia. I do think it's going to be a really good game, a competitive game. I don't know that it's going to be a classic, but I'm leaning Georgia and that Georgia defense because, to me, if you compare the Georgia offense and the Tennessee offense, sure, the Tennessee offense is better than the Georgia offense, but by how much? Versus how much better is the Georgia defense than the Tennessee defense? Considerably better.
Yeah. And are you very confident? Like, are you after that game, after seeing Bama, are you like significantly more confident in Ohio State beating Bama if they play again? If Bama makes the playoff?
Yes, I would agree with that. Yes, Bama's now shown us a few times that they're vulnerable. What's really odd about Bama is that they've played 3 games, Texas, Texas A&M, and Tennessee, that they've piled up all these penalties. Like, that's something that I would expect Bama to correct. They've been in the 15 or 17 range in penalties, and a certain number of those, aggression kind of penalties, and I'm not talking about unnecessary, roughness or things like that, but I'm talking about holding and pass interference. And, most coaches will tell you that a certain level of penalties that they don't mind because they want their teams to be aggressive. But we're talking about concentration issues just over and over and over and over that you just always think Bama gets corrected. They're too poised, too disciplined for that, but not this year so far.
Do you think it's because Saban isn't as involved because he's getting up there in age? Do you think that might be part of it? He's leaving it more to the coordinators and they aren't disciplining the players as much?
Well, it's impossible for me to verify that, but I think that's a valid theory. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see that Ohio State-Michigan game. I don't know. Do you think this is a better Michigan team than last year, or do you think it's too early to tell?
I think both teams are actually better.
Yeah, I would say so as well.
Ohio State's got a better defense, and their offensive line is, let's say, nastier, tougher, more physical. And with Mayan Williams complimenting Travion Henderson, they're even better at running back this year than they were last year. And CJ Stroud should be.
Yeah, Justin
he had last year, but he should be a better quarterback this year. And I think when I've seen him have to make throws in the very few challenging kind of situations that they've had, I think he's a little bit better. And Michigan, with J.J. McCarthy running the offense, they just have such a higher ceiling. And I think Blake Corum has become like a man, where before he was a piece to be used, in space, or to get his 12 carries plus a couple throws out to the flat to use him as a weapon. Now he's a man.
It was funny. I was watching this documentary about his high school football team, and it's so funny.
Yeah.
Like, now he was just a high school guy. Now he's like this big star.
Yeah.
What do you think about? Cool. What do you think about Clemson? Like, I know people are like ragging on them for losing double overtime to Wake Forest, but I don't know. Wake Forest, by the end of the year, they could be a top 10 team. They could win all their games. Like, I don't think that's that bad of a performance, as people are saying.
Well, I think we tend to judge these teams, and we think that if you've got Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, somebody like that on your jersey, that you're supposed to be perfect and annihilate everyone. And I think there are letdowns. Any coach that's been truly honest about it, and a number of players say that, not that you don't go out there every week and give a strong effort and do your best, but there's only 3 or 4 times in a season where you can just show up and just be like so intense that you could run through a brick wall. And I'm not saying that Clemson shouldn't have been up for that game against Wake Forest, and maybe they were. I'm just saying that, I don't consider Clemson to be a great team, but I consider them one of the 5 or 6 best teams in college football, and it's tough to put together a complete game. But when they've needed to, they've dominated Florida State in stretches of that game enough to make it a fairly comfortable win. I know there was an onside kick with 2 minutes left, and a fairly comfortable win, even more so against NC State. So no team's going to go through the entire season and not get challenged. We've already seen everybody get challenged except Ohio State, I guess, to a certain extent they did against Notre Dame. So really everyone's been challenged.
Yeah.
At some point.
Are you confident that, I mean, I don't know, like, do you think that Ole Miss, do you think they have like about a 40% chance to beat Alabama after seeing Alabama against Tennessee?
Where are they playing?
They're playing in Oxford.
Yeah, I'd go 40.
Yeah. I'm excited for that game because
at the most.
Lane Kiffin actually has a defense, which makes him like, I mean, I never liked the guy when he was at USC, but I'm like, I was always like, if this guy had a defense, like, they could actually like live up to expectations there, those USC teams that he had.
Absolutely. And I've got to credit Lane Kiffin because, you know, I've got to say that there have been times when with some of these gurus like a Mike Leach, I've sometimes questioned, is it more important for them to win the game or throw for 500 yards? And I'm not totally serious when I say that. I believe Mike Leach wants to win football games, and I've got no disrespect because he obviously has gone to a place like Texas Tech and finished in the top 25 5 times. So obviously he was about winning, but it just seems like there was some kind of disregard to a certain extent for the other side of the ball. Where Lane Kiffin, if I recall correctly, this last recruiting class, his top 7 recruits were all defensive players. And obviously they've addressed it already, and they're really good on defense. And I don't think that your average college football fan understands how committed Lane Kiffin is to running the ball either. They ran 69 times against Auburn and threw it 19 times.
Yeah. And what do you think of? I'm excited to see that Oregon UCLA game this week. What do you think of Oregon as far with their new staff? Do you think that, like, what do you think? Do you think they have a better potential than they did under Mark Cristobal with the current staff, with what you've seen, or?
Well, I got to say that the only track record we have on Dan Lanning is that he's been the Oregon coach now for 6 games. That's all we've got on Dan Lanning versus Mario Cristobal. And there were certainly a lot of pluses, but also some minuses of Mario Cristobal at Oregon. What we see out of Mario Cristobal this season at Miami isn't necessarily that impressive. Does anyone not think that Manny Diaz would be doing the same thing with Miami this year than Mario Cristobal doing?
Yeah.
Manny Diaz went 7-5. They beat NC State and Pitt. They didn't lose games, at least last season, to the likes of Middle Tennessee State. So I don't think I've never thought that Mario Cristobal was a strong, I look at it this way. If there are 3 basic components to being a college football coach, and obviously there's a lot more than this, but to break it down in a simple fashion, there's number 1, there's talent acquisition, recruiting. How well do you recruit? How well do you assemble a staff that recruits? Everything regarded to player acquisition. How good are you? Number 2 is culture, developing players, building a program, your communication with the team, everything that involves the culture of the team and the program. And then number 3, game preparation, scheming, adjustments during the game, all of that deals with on the field game preparation and execution. And Mario Cristobal, I know he can recruit. And I know from what he did at Oregon, he must be able to run a program, be a CEO. But the third component there, I don't see any strong indications that he's that good in that area.
It'll be interesting to see because, I don't know. I thought it was fun, talking to Eric and Ben about our new coaches and what we were going to expect out of them. And yeah, But yeah, I think that, I don't know, I just hope that Marcus Freeman becomes a little more involved in the offense, because right now the offense is just bad at Notre Dame. It's just bad. It's embarrassing, honestly. Yeah, but we'll see what will happen next year. Or hopefully there'll be changes this year. But if not, hopefully we'll get a new offensive staff and we can have more success on offense at Notre Dame. But yeah, Mark, I'm sorry someone hacked into your channel. Did you lose any money from it? Like, should we make a GoFundMe for you?
No, we're fine. I think we're fine. YouTube is recovering those videos, and they think they're going to be able to do that. They like if you try to go back and watch my top. Now I reposted the top 25 that actually makes sense because I had that saved. And like I posted an LSU video today that got hacked, and I had Big Ten power rankings and SEC power rankings and ACC. Like if somebody wanted to watch, now this seems ridiculous, but I know from the numbers that people actually go back like this late and watch the post game from Saturday night. And like that live stream's wiped out. The Friday night call-in show, the Saturday call-in show. I did a Michigan Penn State analysis that had close to 20,000 views. That got wiped out. So anyway, they think that they're going to recover them, but you know, college football being as timely as it is, them recovering this in like 3 days isn't going to do a lot. But it's fine. But I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a bummer. I like, why would he do that to Mark's YouTube channel? Like, I don't know. Like, out of everyone in the college football community, I don't know. You're like the least make people madable person. If I could.
Yeah, well, I know what you mean, but yeah. Anyway, if I could 100% guarantee or confirm who it was, which I am about 98% sure, then I would, yeah. Like Tim says, I want a name. I want a name. Yeah.
Do we know? Do we know who it is? Like, if you say the name, we'll be like, oh, we know the person.
I think that like this is just a guess. Like 30% of you, maybe something in that range.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not like somebody I have on here all the time and so forth, but it was somebody that was involved in content creation on like other channels and
on a team channel.
Pardon me?
On a team channel?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, anything else?
Nope. Just I'm recovering. I think winning Tie Guy Sports Jeopardy show cleared my recovery. So
oh, nice!
Congratulations.
I'm ready.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So definitely check out Sports Jeopardy Monday nights on the Tie Guy channel. It's a lot of fun. And right after that, we go over to the USC show. Right after. So it's a lot of fun.
Sweet. Love it.
So, yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to take these other calls. I appreciate you calling.
Have a great night, Mark. And let's get those videos back if we can.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate that.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got J-Dub on the line. J-Dub, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, how are we doing?
I'm doing well.
Sufficiently recovered from Saturday.
That's good to know.
I like many Alabama fans, and we get told this over and over and over again.
Yeah.
That we're making excuses when what we're really doing is self-evaluating the team and determining what could we have done to change the outcome, and not have 17 penalties, not get a pass interference call against us every 4 times somebody throws a pass. That might be a good idea. Not jump off sides 5 times. That might be a good idea. Not muff a punt. That might be a good idea. Learn to play in front of 102,000 crazy people. That might be a good idea. None of which is taking anything away from Tennessee. It's just Alabama looking at what could they have done to improve their own odds.
Yeah.
I have come to the conclusion, I hope I am wrong, but I am smelling 2010 all over again. 2010, the worst of the Saban years.
Yes.
Outside of his first. They lose two games. They go undefeated, lose to Florida in the SEC title game, lose to Utah in the Sugar Bowl in 2008, come back, run the table, and then lose 3 times in 2010 because they kind of lost their direction. And now we're seeing on Twitter and on other social media places things we have not seen before. And that is former players speaking up and saying, calling out the current players, saying, what are you doing? We had Mark Barron. We had C.J. Mosley. We had Dante Hightower, Minka Fitzpatrick, a couple other players saying, what do you mean you weren't motivated? You were anxious. You're not sufficiently motivated. This isn't Alabama football. You're letting down the tradition. And I think that's really what's going on here. I think that the talent is there, but mentally, I don't know that the team is strong enough to do what people expect Alabama to do.
They're getting penalized at an alarming rate. And, they started that one drive against Tennessee and they got hit with 4 penalties.
Yeah.
And again, if somebody's going to be running 100 miles an hour and they hit somebody out of bounds, there's a level of discipline to that. And you don't want to see that very often, but it's an effort flag versus a concentration issue. Concentration flag, false starts, procedure penalties, and those are the majority of them, besides all this pass interference in the secondary.
Yeah, I think, well, I know it drives the mental lapses. The mental lapse penalties are what drives Saban crazy. He's going to go more crazy over somebody making a mental mistake as opposed to, well, I was too aggressive or I jumped the route or something like that. That's going to bother him more. Where I think what's really hurting Alabama this year is I think Bill O'Brien, I think the coordinators, not Pete Golding got it handed to him in Knoxville Saturday. I mean, they were completely outcoached. The Alabama defense was outcoached. But there's no excuse for some of the offensive decisions that Bill O'Brien has made, not just this year, but last year, now continuing on to this year, the clock management at the end of the game. I mean, I'm not blaming Reichard for missing a 50-yard field goal. The guy's been clutch most of the time he's been in Tuscaloosa. So I'm not blaming that. But that should have been the last snap of regulation. There should have been no Tennessee should have never touched the ball. What are you doing throwing on 3rd down there? Run the ball, make Tennessee burn their last timeout, and then kick the field goal at the end of the game. And maybe we'll see you in overtime, and who knows what happens then. But I think the coordinators have really let the tide down this year, especially Bill O'Brien. And I'm not chalking this up to Saban so much as I think there needs to be somebody come in and shake up the locker room. Somebody needs to. Some of these former players need to show up on the sidelines at one of these games and get everybody back in gear, like Miami used to do. Miami used to have, a lot of their former players on the sidelines, and the current players didn't want to let them down.
Yep.
And I think we need some of that in Tuscaloosa, which is something that has not been needed before, but I think it's necessary now.
Jeff, do you see This Alabama team, though, playing that much differently than last year's team that lost to a okay Texas A&M team that stumbled around against LSU, that stumbled around against Auburn.
No, and I would have expected that they would have learned their lesson from that, and they talked like they did. You know, they talked all off season about how, you know, this was not, you know, they felt that, you know, Bryce Young was saying in the locker room at the national championship game that the season was a letdown. You know, he had just been 5 minutes away from a natty, and he was talking about it being a letdown. They're saying the right things, but then they're not living up to it. Somebody's got to hold their feet to the fire. Now, I mean, it's a first world problem. I understand that. I mean, it's, you know, you got places where people don't have access to running water, and here's Alabama complaining that the air conditioning is not working. You know, I understand it's a first world problem. You know, boo-hoo, poor Alabama. But when does the college season start? When Alabama loses. What was the biggest loss in the regular season last year? Maybe the Michigan-Ohio State game. If it wasn't that, it was the Texas A&M beating Alabama. What's been the biggest loss this year? Tennessee beating Alabama. That's when all the talk, that's when it all starts. And Bama could do just exactly what they did last year. They could put it together and just on sheer talent and just on will find their way through to Atlanta again, and then face Georgia, and then I would think, I'm convinced they'd be motivated against Georgia.
Well, don't you think they're playing one game at this point, meaning Ole Miss, and that's on the road? LSU mathematically has got a shot, but shoot, I don't think that LSU can put together that kind of effort to beat Alabama. They've not shown me to be that good this year. They're riding a roller coaster of themselves, and they're riding the roller coaster, the Alabama roller coaster, but at a much lower level than Alabama's riding it. So Alabama's really going to get challenged by Ole Miss.
Yeah,
That's it.
I think Ole Miss is the biggest challenge.
Yeah,
ahead of Alabama, and a different kind of challenge, because here's a team that's going to run the ball at them. But last year, Ole Miss was going to be a big challenge for Alabama, and with 9 minutes to go in the game, it was 42-7. So, I mean, you know,
yep.
You could have that happen too. What we haven't not seen is we haven't seen Ole Miss yet. And I don't like the who have they played argument, but Ole Miss has not had a real tough schedule yet. Their back half is about twice as hard as their first half.
Oh, yes.
And what we have not seen is Ole Miss in a situation where all of a sudden they have to throw the ball, which is what you would, you know, Kiffin, you think, well, you know, Kiffin throws the ball. He's not doing it by throwing the ball. If anybody's been paying attention to Ole Miss this year, they're running all over the place. They're like the top 2 or 3 in several different rushing categories. And I think if Ole Miss all of a sudden has to throw the ball because they're down 2 scores, what's that going to look like? Because believe it or not, under Lane Kiffin, that's not something they've done or haven't had to do this year.
You are right. Jackson Dart obviously is playing well enough to have won the job and keep the job. But yeah, there's not been a game that's been rested on his shoulders yet. They threw it 19 times and ran it 69 against Auburn.
Yeah, it's not an easy road for Bama. I'm just saying, am I going to write them off? No, because they're still extremely talented, and maybe they fall to 6 or 7 in the rankings. And I'll just say the same thing I said about the rankings last week. Even if they had beaten Tennessee, and you wanted to put them at 6 or 7, I don't care, because it's all going to play itself out. It'll work itself out in the end.
To your earlier point, the toughest team Ole Miss has played is Kentucky. And Kentucky actually threw the game-winning touchdown pass with like 15 or 20 seconds left in the game, but it got called back. and that was a bit of a shaky decision by the officials, but Ole Miss hung on against a Kentucky team, and that is by far the best team they've played. The second best team they played is probably Auburn. And to your point, their last 5 games here, LSU, Texas A&M, Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi State. So,
yeah, that's a lot beefier than their first 5 or 6.
yeah. Yeah,
I just think
beefier than Troy, Central Arkansas, Georgia Tech, Tulsa, Kentucky, Vandy, Auburn.
Yes. Yes. I think but about Bama, much kudos to Tennessee. A deserved win for them. I can understand how their crowd would be, going crazy. It's, most of their student body hadn't even started kindergarten yet the last time they beat Alabama. So I understand why they're all jacked up. When you beat Alabama, it's a big deal. When Alabama beats you, it's just another win on the schedule. When you beat Alabama, it's a program changing event. That's just how it is. But I still think whether they can or not is the issue. But I think the problems with Bama are in-house. They can be fixed and addressed in-house. Whether they do so or not is going to determine how far they go this year. I don't think there's anything out there that's fundamentally wrong with them that can't be corrected in Tuscaloosa itself. Like, I don't think there's like well, we don't have this, and no matter what we do, you're not gonna be able to avoid this, whatever that might be. I think they're all correctable mistakes, and if they are correctable, you're looking at a team that is good enough to win the Natty. But will they do so? We'll wait and see. If I'm Ohio State or Georgia right now, I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased to be where I'm at. I'm very pleased to see this Alabama team lose some of that mojo that those Crimson helmets used to carry.
All right, J-Dub, got anything else for us?
Well, yeah, one last thing, completely off the topic and completely out of left field. Brett Bielema has Illinois 6-1. What? Yeah, a little something to chew on.
Yeah,
Illinois is 2 wins away from winning the Big Ten West. Imagine, can you believe that? Purdue, who they should have beat last year,
wait a minute,
and Northwestern, and they could easily have beaten Indiana. Probably should have beaten Indiana. They ought to be 7-0 right now.
Wait a minute. I just wasn't quite understanding. 2 wins away from winning the West?
Yeah. As far as division losses, they have Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Nebraska, or 3. They have Purdue, Nebraska, and Wisconsin left in the West. That's who's left in the West.
Because if they only win 2 more games, they're going to go 8-4. That means they're going to lose 3 more games. They're going to be 5-4 in the Big Ten. I don't know if that's going to get it done.
Right. I misspoke. My bad.
They've got a game coming up with Purdue that could decide everything.
Yes, and Purdue, who they should have beaten last year, and got away from them. I think they'll handle Nebraska, and they'll beat Northwestern. But the Purdue game, Michael Hogg, he must be chomping at the bit. He'll be all worked up for that.
He called earlier tonight, and I was just trying to get him calmed down. The last couple of times he's called me to let him realize that they're playing Wisconsin, and I know Wisconsin's no good, but they haven't beaten Wisconsin since 2003. So focus on that one first.
Right. He gets a little bit ahead of himself sometimes, but the mere fact that we're even discussing the possibility of the mere fact that it's not November and Illinois is bowl eligible is shocking.
Yeah. Yeah, it is something else.
Hey, folks, thumbs up, Amazon link. You know the routine. Help the man out. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, J-Dub. Appreciate you. Our man J-Dub getting it done. Talking SEC, talking Alabama. And Brett Bielema getting the job done at Illinois. Yes. Can you imagine Illinois in the Big Ten championship game? All right, but the team that was good enough to beat Illinois. Maybe we will conclude the 2022 season, and this will be the only team that was able to knock off the mighty Illini after they marched on to the Big Ten championship and go on to the playoff. Nobody's talking about Illinois' playoff chances. Why don't we have that discussion? They could be 12-1 and in the playoff. What do you think, Jeffrey?
Yeah, Illinois, man, they're doing really good, and yeah, I can't believe that Brett Bielema's turned them around like they have. It's really impressive. But I'm sorry, your channel, I just heard about that you getting hacked and all that or whatever. And I didn't come on your Saturday show. I said I was, but I was so tired on Saturday. I know you keep saying I shouldn't be tired, but I was extremely tired. So I went to
I'm
bed.
Just kidding you, Jeffrey.
I know. I went to bed though, and I didn't get to call in, but yeah, it's funny on that topic with Illinois. Michael Hogue in the chat, I love the guy. He's awesome, man. But he's been talking to me about refs and how refs are not perfect. And he said, but that they make mistakes on calls. Because I was talking to him on Sunday night about the Texas A&M game, how at the end it should have been a pass interference on the last play of the game, but it was the end of the game, blah, 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 and all that. But he said he just wrote me in the chat that Illinois was robbed against Indiana. I agree. That probably should have been a touchdown catch that they called incomplete. But again, refs aren't perfect. They make mistakes. And I mean, Indiana won the game. If you're going to say Illinois should have beaten Indiana, then Texas A&M should have beaten Alabama. I mean, to me, that's how that should work.
So at what point in the game did this happen? Because Michael has brought this up to me, I don't know how many times as well. And I watched that game, but I think we were sitting here for part of it as well. So I didn't, lock in on every play, and I don't remember that play.
It was in, I don't remember what quarter, but it was in like the middle of the game or whatever. But Illinois was up by like 3 or whatever, or 7. And they had to play a touchdown pass that they threw into the end zone. But the guy had the ball, and it looked like he did survive the ground. But at the very end of the play, the ball blew out of his hand, and they called it a incomplete pass, and it probably should have been a touchdown. I mean, I agree. I mean, again, I'm not a homer here, even though I root for Indiana, but I also root for Alabama and other teams as well. It doesn't matter specifically. But if you're going to say that was robbed, but then you're not going to say that the Texas A&M game in Alabama that it wasn't robbed either. That's not fair because, again, refs are not perfect. I agree it should have been a touchdown, but they called it incomplete. That's not up to me.
Absolutely. So here we are with Illinois at 6-1, losing to Indiana of all teams, but they've beaten Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, those 3 for the first time since 1983. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's kind of like I also talk about with people saying that when you talk about Indiana beating Illinois, it was in week 1. If Illinois played Indiana now, Illinois probably would win, just like how Florida beat Utah, but I think Utah would beat Florida now. I mean, again, week 1 games are not indicative of the result. Oregon would not lose to Georgia 49-3 today. The same thing. Oregon got destroyed. Everybody was off the Oregon train, and now Oregon's winning and playing a lot better. Do I think they beat Georgia? No, but it'd be a lot closer.
Yeah. I think it's reasonable to look at 2 teams like Georgia and Oregon and say, the game was what it was. It's 49-3. That's in the record book. Georgia was that good on that day, and Oregon was that bad. But it's all you have to do is look at Oregon and Georgia's other results and say, well, if Georgia can play a game like they did against Missouri, then obviously if they played Oregon again, they might win by 20. They might win a close game. They might, but yeah, 49-3. It happened. All credit to Georgia, but yeah, you can look at the rest of the season results and come up with a better conclusion on how good the teams are.
Mm-hmm. And again, like I said, week one results are indicative of how good a team is, because I remember last season people were panicking on Georgia because they barely beat Clemson in week one. It was like 10-3, and they were like, oh, the offense is bad and everything. And then they end up winning the national championship.
True.
So again, it is what it is. But I had an interesting question from not exactly from my dad, but me and my dad were kind of arguing about it a little bit. But my dad was talking about Alabama, and he was like, if they had lost to Texas, he told me that they would run through the rest of the schedule and they would have won. And I'm like, wait a minute. I told you if Quinn Ewers was healthy that Texas would have won. And you said, well, we won't know that. Well, we don't know that Alabama would run through the schedule and win the rest of their games. They could easily have lost to Tennessee anyway if they had lost to Texas.
Exactly right. I'm on your side, Jeffrey. Sorry, Dad. All due respect to you and your position. I'm sure you're a tremendous father. Actually, Jeffrey has let me know that you are an amazing father. I'm sure you are, but you can make that see. This is, I'll liken this to last season's Alabama playoff run. They had lost John Mechie, and then of course in the second quarter of the championship game they lost Jamison Williams. I have no issue with an Alabama fan saying, I think we would have won the national championship with Jamison Williams in the lineup. I have no issue with that. But I had a full-blown argument with somebody on here because this person said, it's a fact. They would have won the national championship with Jamison. And I'm like, okay, sir, I understand your opinion. It is an opinion, and it's actually a reasonable one. One of the best receivers in the country was lost. You lost in the last 4 minutes of the game. You can reasonably say that you think they would have won, but we don't know. We don't have an alternate universe to play the game. We don't know. You cannot say it's a fact, like he wanted the national championship to be given to Alabama because everyone knows that they would have won the national championship. No, we don't know.
I could say that if Indiana had their two receivers against Nebraska, they would have won, but that doesn't mean that they would have won. They probably wouldn't have won, but I can make the argument, but you can't say it. So I agree with you 100%. But my thing is about Alabama is, like, I think J-Dub is one of the best callers on here. And if he's listening to me, he's probably not going to like what I have to say, but I think he's one of the best callers on the whole entire show. But listening to him talking, he admits it, but Alabama, he's like talking about them. This could be a 2010 season. I wrote in the chat, I said Alabama 2010 is over Indiana 2020. Indiana 2020 was the best season Indiana's had in the last 30 plus years. And yet you're worried that Alabama this season is Alabama 2010. Alabama 2010 was still fantastic.
Yeah.
That is just messed up. I mean, how could that be a bad thing? That Alabama 2010 could happen. You went 10-3.
Well, I'm understanding your point, but I'm also trying to explain J-Dub's point, and it's that Nick Saban plays 4 national championships and SEC championships. They didn't accomplish either one of those, and they lost 3 games. It is the worst Alabama season under Saban, excluding his first, and so they did lose 3 games. So he's just basically saying he thinks this team could lose 3 games.
Well, they could have already lost 3 games, hypothetically. Again, we'll never know, but they could have easily lost to Texas and Texas A&M, and they'd be 4-3 right now. But I'm not saying anything bad. Like I said, I'm just saying that 10-3 is fantastic, and any team, especially that's not like obviously Penn State or worse. Not Penn State. Penn State wants to win 10 games, but worse than that would want to win. 10-3 would be fantastic. I'm just saying that. To me, with Alabama, is that the problem? And again, I know because I watch every single game, and I've been rooting for Alabama since I was a child. I mean, I only, like I said, root for Indiana because no one likes them, like nobody, even Troy Aikman. But again, I'm just saying that any program would basically kill for 10-3. 10-3 is fantastic. Alabama wins all the time, and when they don't win, like I said, a championship game, it's no good. And I understand they're playing for championships, but any program would want that. Most programs don't get that. And Alabama,
Sure.
I mean, that one year you had that guy smash the participation trophy for the championship game back in like 2016, 2017, whenever they lost. And it was like, come on, man. It's like you lost the game. You end up winning it next year. Again, that's just me coming from a opinion of you should be happy with what you have. Alabama's still one of the best teams in the country. They're still fantastic to watch. There's nothing wrong with losing a game every now and then.
Yeah, I didn't quite take it like that myself. I just thought he was saying that they have a lot of issues. They're not dealing with them. They're riding a tightrope, and they've won a few, and they've lost now one on a tightrope, and so they may lose a couple more. The last time, I'm thinking about my own fan experience and trying to compare my standards versus what's going on. And if you take the Luke Fickell year out, which Ohio State fans tend to do, including myself, I always condition that with the Luke Fickell year in 2011 because we didn't have a set coach. It was an interim coach, but obviously the season still counts, and Ohio State went 6-7. But if you take that season out, they haven't lost 3 games since 2004 in a regular season.
That's when I was born.
So, yeah. Again, I understand your point. You're just basically saying college football fans, let's get a grip, and Alabama fans get a grip. You've got it really good. I think he's just basically saying that he sees issues in this team that may not get corrected, and therefore they may lose 3 games. That Alabama team, by the way, also was the same team that, even though they had lost 3 games and were 9-3, met a Michigan State team on New Year's Day in the Capital One Bowl that was a co-Big Ten champion, and they wiped them off the planet, 49-7.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the other problem with, and I'm not talking about J-Dub, but again, some Alabama fans, and I read a lot of them, but my problem with some of them is that, and he even pointed it out that he wasn't making excuses about the game, but it's like you have on the main. I pull up college football after the next day because again I went to sleep. I actually barely got to see the end of the game, and immediately I was asleep after that because again I didn't sleep the night before or whatever. But again, the first thing you see on the headline is the controversial pass interference call from Alabama, and it's written in an article by somebody that's getting paid a lot of money to write articles. And it's like, well, what about the Tennessee pass interference? That was questionable as well. Mm-hmm. There is so much skewed bias. And again, this is coming from me, and I like the team. I like Alabama. I'm just going to point that out. I've been watching them since I was little, so I'm not trashing them here. But that is poor storytelling there. You can't look at one side and make it biased toward Alabama because they're supposed to win every game. Versus, again, you could say I could write it if I was getting paid by 247 or one of these people to write articles and say, well, what about Tennessee's passer? That was questionable. Again, it's just that's why the excuses are made because Alabama, a lot of the fan base is ridiculous. And they do make excuses over everything. Like, even if they win a game, there's excuse, we should have won by more. It's ridiculous. And I like reasonable fans of Alabama, and there's not many, because most of them are just ridiculous. And there's a lot of people that aren't even legit fans because they only root for the team because they win all the time. Again, that's just ridiculous. And the bias is legit. Like I said, I had a guy write me in the comment section on one of my videos, and I'm not promoting myself, but again, this dude was like saying that I like watching your videos because of the fact that I'm not biased. And I'm like, well, yeah, thanks, because not a lot of people are. And I'm like, you do a great job too, Mark, because your videos are not biased, but I watch tons of stuff. I used to watch ESPN YouTube videos when I was younger. I don't anymore, but it's just so biased, and it's just ridiculous how biased they are towards certain teams. And Alabama's one of them because they win. And it shouldn't be that way because you're supposed to report facts, not basically what you want.
Well, Jeffrey, we don't mind you promoting your channel, so everybody get on over to name of the channel, Jeffrey. Help me out.
Only Talk Sports.
Only Talk Sports. It was on the tip of my tongue. I couldn't quite spit it out. Only Talk Sports. And let me ask you this, Jeffrey. Are you able to drop the link in the chat, or does somebody else have to do that?
Somebody else has to do that. I don't know how to do that.
People can't be dropping their own. Got that. And so we will do that a little bit later.
Oh, thank you.
What else is on your mind? Anything else?
Well, I will say also, everybody support Mark Rogers as the voice of college football, because again, your content is fantastic. I remember when I first started watching you again, probably about 2 years ago. I was like, man, finally I found a channel that is just good old fashioned legitimate college football talk. Again, I'm like, you should be on ESPN, and then I'm like reading your bio. Oh wait, you were on ESPN. It's like, again, I see why you're not on ESPN, because you do better than ESPN. I don't have any problems with some of the ESPN people because I like some of them, but again, you do a fantastic job. I'm trying to think real quick, because I know there's probably people behind me. I mean, there was a lot of great games last week. I didn't get to talk about on Saturday night because I was wasted or whatever. I'm not that way, but I was just so tired. But yeah, I talked me out like Southern. I'm saying wasted like I don't drink. Funny story about drinking. I'm sorry, I'll say it real quick. But
Sure.
I was at when I was in the driving school, which is I was homeschooled by my mom, so I didn't go to like driver's ed at school. So I went to this driving school, it was called, in my town, where they help you learn how to drive and everything. And they put these drunk goggles on me and all these other people, man. Everybody, I couldn't see because it was so funny. I wear glasses, but I don't wear them on here because of the glare. I don't like the glare.
Yeah.
But they were my old glasses and they were dying. I couldn't see out of them anymore. So I had the drunk goggles and I couldn't see anyway. So I was doing really good and everybody else was stumbling around. They were like, have you drunk before? I'm like, or drank before? I'm like, no, I've never drank before. I just can't see anything. And it's like
great.
they passed me anyway because I'm squinting around. I shouldn't even have been driving. It was illegal. I shouldn't even have been driving. But the reason why I couldn't get new glasses was because it was during the virus and everything. Everything was shut down. But that was insane. It was like, again, I'm like, it's like, people, I don't drink. I mean, if I was drunk, I'd really be insane. It's like, I don't know. But yeah, it was funny. But yeah, I guess I'll just say, what games are you looking forward to the most this weekend? Even though I'm gonna ask that on Thursday or whenever I get on here again.
Well, let's see. At first glance, I would love if Syracuse gave Clemson a game, but I've got my doubts. Let's also look at, for one half of the game, it'll be interesting to watch Ohio State's offense against Iowa's defense. UCLA and Oregon, really want to see that game. It's going to be played at the same time. Oh, this is a killer here, Jeffrey. This is great, but to try to keep track of games like I do, Ole Miss, LSU, UCLA, Oregon, Texas, Oklahoma State, all playing at the same time at 3:30 Eastern. So I'd like to keep track of those games. And then we got Mississippi State. Maybe they'll be able to give Alabama a challenge at 7 o'clock. Kind of an odd decision by ABC to go with Minnesota, Penn State in prime time. Okay. And those would be the games. And then certainly Kansas State could give TCU a run on Saturday as well.
Yeah, that 3:30 window is the best window, and I'm glad I'm going to be able to watch those games, because again, when Alabama's on, I don't get to flip it that much because of the fact, for some ungodly reason, our TV, the streaming service that we use, CBS always freezes if I change the channel and go back to it. So I have to keep it on CBS the first time. So I don't get to watch none of the other games, but that window's insane. Ole Miss, LSU, man, that's insane right there. UCLA, or those are good games. I think for the Pac-12, and I'll mention this tomorrow night on Tony and Tim's show or on your channel, whatever. But UCLA to me has to win against Oregon and USC and win out, and that would be the Pac-12's last chance to make the playoff, in my opinion. Because I think if UCLA don't win, then the rest of the teams are going to cannibalize themselves, and they're all going to have at least 2 losses, and they're not going to make the playoff. They have to win out.
Yeah. On one hand, if we look at playoff history, we'll see that if you're a conference champion with 1 loss, you've got a very high percentage chance of making the playoff. However, I just think this is a different year with what we see going on in the SEC with Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Ole Miss, what we see with Ohio State and Michigan, and not seeing other teams in the Big Ten that look ready to challenge either one of them. So we may have a undefeated versus a 1-loss Ohio State or Michigan team that's still going to get a ton of consideration over like a UCLA with 1 loss, a Pac-12 team with 1 loss in the championship. And that's not even taking into consideration Clemson, who, based on my estimation, has beaten the 3 best teams that are on their schedule in conference play, even though Syracuse has an undefeated record. So Clemson has basically cleared most of the hurdles that it's facing, although Syracuse, Notre Dame could give them some problems, in North Carolina in an ACC championship game. So, yeah, it looks like the Pac-12 winner is going to have to be undefeated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. One last thing is, again, I know there's people behind me, but I just thought that it's very interesting. Besides Northwestern in the Big Ten, Vanderbilt in the SEC, and Colorado in the Pac-12, those three teams are bad, obviously.
Yeah.
But then after that, in those leagues, all the other teams are competent. The Big 12 is obviously every team's competent, but the bottom teams in the ACC, man, they're bad. They're just horrible. I mean, they're all cannibalizing themselves, man. I mean, like people, like you said, Georgia Tech in your video. I watched your ACC video. Georgia Tech could win the Coastal somehow. That's how bad the ACC is. I mean, and you're right. Jeff Collins was bad. Georgia Tech's good now that he's gone. You're right. I was wrong when I was talking to you about that one time.
Yeah, we had a little conversation about Jeff Collins a couple of weeks ago, right before he got fired.
Yeah, you're right.
Some
Jeff
dude
Collins
that's their offensive line coach beats Pitt and Duke in consecutive weeks. Yeah.
Crazy. Yep. That's crazy, man. I can't believe that. But yeah, I mean, hey, at least one school's benefiting from it. I mean, really, actually, all of them. Arizona State won after they fired Herm Edwards, and Carl Durrell won after he was fired at Colorado, and Wisconsin won after Paul Chris. I guess firing coaches midseason is good. I didn't like it, but I guess it is good.
And for anybody else out there that wants to check out my ACC rankings that Jeffrey's referring to, unfortunately, they're not up anymore. They've been deleted. So I'll have to decide whether to try to post that again or just wait until YouTube kicks in, and they're supposedly recovering all these videos. So we shall see.
I'm glad I watched it then before it got hacked.
Yes. Yes, it did. All right, Jeffrey, anything else, man?
Nah, I guess I'm good. People probably want me to get off, but this is a fantastic conversation. I didn't glitch, so that's great. My internet's still strong, but it did really good today, and I had a great time talking on here. I can't wait for the games. I'll probably call in once more before the weekend, but man, again, everybody like and subscribe to Mark Rogers, because again, this content is fantastic, and even YouTube can't get rid of this guy. I don't care. It's ridiculous.
Thanks so much for that, Jeffrey. And keep in mind, Joey and Tim have both left the link to Jeffrey's channel in the chat. So please grab it there. And I subscribed the other day, so I'm on board, and appreciate Jeffrey. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Thank you so much, and I can't wait to talk to you again. Thank you.
All right, our man Jeffrey. We got Joey next, then we got Holden, and we saw Eric pop up for a few minutes. So Eric, come on back, and you would be our last call. But let's get to Joey. Joey, what's going on tonight? Hello, Joey. Knowing Joey, he's probably
Oh, there I am.
And moderating like 14 different shows at the same time right now.
You're actually right. I was. You're actually right. I had me on mute with moderating.
There you go.
So I wanted to call in and talk about every week this year has been some really, really good games. I mean, I don't remember the last time we've had so many good games in a season like this early in the season, 6-7 weeks in.
Yep.
Where every week has been thrillers. And so I was looking back, and I thought it was kind of funny. I was looking back to see what they picked early season to be the best game of the week. So I was wondering how much eyes was on Tennessee and Alabama at the preseason, before it started.
Yeah.
And there was none. The big games were supposed to be Michigan at Penn State, Iowa State at Texas, LSU at Florida. That was supposed to be the big games, not Tennessee.
According to who?
On 3.
Oh, okay. Well,
on 3 sports. So, I mean, I'm just saying that looking back at that. And so like this week, honestly, I think the Syracuse and Clemson game is going to be a really, really good game. Just through their history, it seems like they go in pairs of 2. So like they'll have 2 seasons where Clemson just blows Syracuse away, and 2 seasons where they play really close, or Syracuse comes away with a win. And last year they played really close. It was 17-14. And the year before they were blowing out. So I just think it's going to go 2 years in a row. This might be the year that Syracuse can get Clemson. So I think I'm going to call that my upset this week. I think Syracuse will upset Clemson.
Nice. Is this official, Joey?
This is official. I'm going to call it my upset this week. If I lose again, I don't care. I'd be all right. Just
hey,
you know, I didn't
everybody out there,
listen
up, listen up. Joey has made an upset prediction, and he's got a phenomenal record for his one big upset pick of the week: Syracuse over Clemson. I would love it. Sorry, Jordan. I apologize to Jordan Bowman. We love Jordan, but just to mix things up and see a different team in there, I would love to see Syracuse win that game.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they're playing really good football this year, and just looking back, like last year score, what was it? Clemson won 27-23, I believe it was, wasn't it?
27.
No, that was no, it wasn't. No, last year was the 17-14.
17-14.
17-14.
Yep.
Yeah, 2018 was 27-23.
Yep.
Travis Etienne run a ball in right there at the end, like 30 seconds to go or something.
That was the Chase Bryce game where he saved the season.
Yeah.
Chase Bryce, the later Duke and Appalachian State quarterback, hit a 4th and 6 pass to save Clemson. Yep.
Jordan says it's all good. My team isn't relevant. I guess he's talking to me. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to another good weekend of games, and I think that Syracuse and Clemson game is going to be a great game this year. So I know I'll be tuned into that.
It's not going to surprise anybody out there that knows Joey that as soon as Joey found out that the account was hacked and videos deleted and all that, you know, Joey was bam. He was on the phone. He was texting me, wanting to know if there was anything that he could do to help me out. So, Joey, I always appreciate you being here for me.
I appreciate you and everything you do for us. Crap. I mean, you give all of us a huge platform to come on, you know. We love having you as a guest on all of our shows and stuff. So, yeah, we appreciate you, Mark. So, and anybody in the chat, man, I tell you what, you need to get over on Patreon and join us in Discord. We really have a good time. There's some really smart people in there that know some good things about football, and I mean, you can get into some great chat. So come on into to Patreon and come over in Discord. Mark will send you the link for Discord. Man, you won't be disappointed. We'll have a good time.
I just added
Mark, that's all I got, man.
in the live chat.
Thank you, Joey. Mark, I'm gonna get out of here. All right, we'll see you later, buddy.
Good to hear from you. Our man Joey Foster, Mountaineer to the core. Lives and breathes, loves his Mountaineers. And we have just dropped the Patreon link in the chat. $5 a month. Okay. $5 a month. What you get are my picks, which were pretty marginal for much of the season until 2 weeks ago. I am 25-12 against the spread the last 2 weekends. So we will take that anytime. That will make you a lot of money. Do this one time. You want to make a couple bucks, or you want to figure out what you could make, and I am in no way promoting my picks as the picks to take to the bank. But I will say I run 60% against the spread and have for, I hate to admit this long, I've been picking college football games for 40 years. But if you bet Vegas and you pick 100 football games, 100 college football games, and you get 60 right and 40 wrong, you're going to lose, let's say $100 times 40. You're going to lose $4,000 on those 40 losses. But in those 60 wins, you're going to pick up $91 per 100, 91 cents on the dollar. So that's $54.60. So you make yourself over $1,400. There you go. All right. So 25-12 against the spread the last 2 weekends. I'll take that. Let's keep that rolling. And then also keep in mind that we get predictions to provide to all of you. entertainment purposes only from our media panel. So some of your favorite media contributors here at the Voice of College Football: Corey Bratta, Tony Gerdeman, the Wholesome One, Steve Hellwagon, and Steve Dace. Those guys are providing their predictions here on Patreon. Then also you get Steve Merrill from Wager Talk. He gives his upset selection of the week. Or no, I'm getting him confused now with Joey's upset pick of the week. It is simply Steve's under the radar selection of the week, and Steve is now 6-1 against the spread. That's pretty darn good. 6-1 against the spread. And then on top of all that, you get to talk to the knuckleheads all the time, 24/7, 365. So please join us on Patreon. The link is, I'm dropping it right now in the chat. Join us on Patreon. You go to Patreon, that's the link right there. Or if you just go to Patreon, search Mark Rogers TV, sign up right there, and you get all those benefits. Plus, you can request additional content from me. DeAndre, BGPO Football Funk, thank you so much for saying hi. Thank you so much for the super chat. What is good? DeAndre, Jordan Bowman, Eddie Craven, they have delivered Clemson previews every Friday. Live discussion there. It's typically at 5:30 Eastern, I believe. So get on over to the Clemson channel and join us for Clemson Live with Jordan, DeAndre, and Eddie. That is on Friday at 5:30 Eastern time. And then they do the post game following Clemson Syracuse. That should be a good one on Saturday. All right. 2 more calls. Here we go. We got Holden on the line from North Carolina. And Holden, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Mark. How you doing?
I am doing just fine. What's going on?
Just real quick, do you need me to try to hurry here, or can I go about 5 to 10 minutes?
No, take your time.
All right. I got quite a few things to run through. Number one, just a couple of the previous callers. I don't remember his name. 2 callers ago, he was talking about the media, some of the bias in the media, and I appreciate him talking about that. I'm a Wake Forest fan, so not the friendliest relation with media, especially ESPN and the like. And then the previous caller, he was talking about the Clemson-Syracuse game, and also as a Wake fan, that would be quite chaotic if Syracuse were to beat Clemson, and then we beat Syracuse. It's a 3-way tie, assuming everyone else wins out. And the tiebreaker for the ACC is an outsourced analytics ranking system, which I don't really like our chances in that. But
how far down the tie-breaking list is that?
That is the immediate tiebreaker if you have a 3-way tie, a 3-way head-to-head tie between. If you have 3 teams that all have the same in-conference record,
sure,
and the head-to-heads are canceled out because they all beat each other, then the tiebreaker after that is, let me see if I can find it. It is a sports analytics website.
Interesting. Okay.
That it's a ranking system. Here we go. I'm almost there. The official website, the tiebreaker policy. By the team rating score metric provided by Sports Source Analytics. So that is their determinant. That is the 7th tiebreaker.
Oh, that's
sorry.
Well, let's understand, Holden. That's the 7th tiebreaker.
Sorry, I was looking at but the ones above it are combined head-to-head win percentage among the tied teams for a 3-team tie. So presumably
combined
they would
winning percentage in the conference or overall
head-to-head winning percentage. That's the first in a 3-team tie, so they'd all be tied.
Yeah.
Then win percentage of the tied teams in the division; those would be the same.
Yep.
Head-to-head composition versus the team within the division with the best overall conference win percentage, and they would all be tied. So I think that's just the same as the first one.
Well, it has to be different in some way. Are they talking about the team outside those 3? So let's say North Carolina State goes 6-2 in the conference.
I think that would be like a tiebreaker for the further down rankings, I think is what that one more so is. Because I think that for teams in first place, that would effectively be the same thing as just the combined head-to-head win percentage among the tied teams, because they are all the first place teams.
Yeah, in this scenario, I think what is played out is that all those become ties because none of those teams lost to anybody else.
Here, Mark, let me send you, I don't do the private chat here, the link to the website.
If I'm not mistaken, if I'm reading this correctly, the tiebreakers that you're talking about, those come into play when teams lose multiple games. So if they're losing games outside of their three-way tiebreaker, then that's where those other tiebreakers apply. But if all those three teams did was lose to each other and beat everyone else, then those tiebreakers are all going to be tied.
Yeah, so that's why the first one doesn't the first one through the sixth one are all going to be irrelevant, and that's why it becomes the seventh one.
Gotcha.
It's that higher ranking by the outsourced analytics website that they're going to use. And those rankings are not publicly released as far as I know until if the tiebreaker were necessary, I think that is the point at which they would be released. So that would be
we have no idea what's being computed by this analytics group.
My best guess would just be sort of a compilation, or at least something similar to, some of the other analytics, FPI, SP+, things like that.
Yeah, some kind of determination on how dominant the teams are.
To be frank, my assumption would be that Clemson would win the tiebreaker.
Yeah. I think you could generally look at scores and tell who probably is the most dominant team.
Yeah. So I just appreciated them talking about some of those things. Those were cool to hear about. But then moving on actually to your top 25 that actually makes sense. I had a couple questions for a few different teams about it. I can just go through them. You had North Carolina down at 22. I assume that is just their pretty horrible strength of schedule.
Yes. So the three components are results. Did you win the game or lose the game? Number two are the opponents, the schedule, and evaluating how tough the schedule is. And then number three would be the performance, i.e. the score of the game. Not exactly the score of the game, but the performance. So if North Carolina beat Duke last week 50-0, I evaluate that performance differently than I do them winning in the last 15 seconds of the game.
Gotcha. And then I guess another team would be NC State. You don't have them up there. Is that obviously the loss to Clemson? That's not too bad. And then the loss to Syracuse the game, I guess you would say was not close, but they didn't have Devin Leary. But he's also out for the season. Does that impact your ranking? Him not being on the team for the rest of the year?
Slightly impacts the ranking. I don't comb through injuries because I think we all, as sports fans, tend to latch on to certain injuries because they are quarterback related. And if I was going to do that, I would want to do it more accurately to really dive into, if I had some kind of staff to dive into injuries across the board, because I think, again, some injuries get publicized and gain a lot of attention because they are to a star player or a quarterback, whereas we would have to evaluate all injuries to any type of productive players involved. And I don't think anyone does that.
And then jumping sort of to the better teams, I guess you would say, you have Ole Miss all the way up at 5. I was curious about that. Just having them up that far when looking at their resume, all I can really see that necessarily jumps out to me is that win over Kentucky, which was obviously a very good win, but sort of, last second and almost in a way more so Kentucky losing to themselves than Ole Miss beating them.
Yeah, it was not a dominant win, that's for sure. I will say this way, just to give a note on the way I approach this every week, is if I had the ability to do this, I would tear apart everybody's schedule from the ground up every week and reevaluate, because we know that past games and the value of those wins or losses change each week, and they should be reevaluated. Well, as one person looking at 131 teams, theoretically, that's impossible to do, or I'd be releasing this thing on Thursday. So what I do is I start on the first game of the season, and usually 1, 2, 3 weeks into the season, that's I'm able to do that. I'm able to look at every game and say, well, they beat A, B, and C, and they beat X, Y, and Z. What is that? But once I've established what the rankings are, about 4 to 5 weeks deep into it, then what I'll do is I'll take the previous week's rankings, and much like probably an AP voter does, is I'll say Alabama lost and they were number 2, so I'm going to drop them to 8. And then, North Carolina State had a good win. They were 23, so I'm going to pop them up to 17 and that sort of thing. And I'll kind of eyeball it, but I won't stop there. The typical AP voter would stop right there. I'll start to then grind through this. So I'll give an estimation of where I think the teams probably moved. And then I'll start making schedule comparisons and performance level of dominance comparisons between all those teams to make sure that I'm not placing somebody above somebody else that I don't believe in that evaluation, if that makes sense. Ole Miss, yeah, they beat Kentucky, they beat Auburn, they beat Georgia Tech. And I don't have it in front of me, but yeah, I was looking at them as a direct comparison against, let's say, Ohio State. And who else is in there?
TCU, maybe?
TCU. Yeah, TCU obviously has a win against Kansas. They've got a dominant win against Oklahoma, and a really good win against Oklahoma State. I would, and I've said this often, that I defend my system. I don't think it's flawless, and certainly there are ranges of teams that are so microscopically close that there are ranges, whether that's from 5 to 12 or 5 to 15 or 7 to 19, whatever it is that particular week, that are microscopic differences. But yeah, I get your point on comparing TCU and whomever else you brought up against Ole Miss.
And then I guess sort of on the same idea, Ole Miss, where would you maybe, if you had to, just rank teams based on how good they are, the order of who would beat who would beat who, if you, played enough games,
Yeah.
what range about do you think you'd put Ole Miss?
Well, I think we're going to find out more about Ole Miss than almost any other team in the country in the next 5 games because of who they play. But I'll put it this way, that I came into the year thinking Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State were the 3 best teams, and I was the most certain about Alabama and Georgia, but pretty sure about Ohio State. From a talent perspective, they needed to prove it to me on the field on the defensive side. And once they have, to a certain extent, even though they haven't been challenged against a good offense, that those 3, I still believe. Now it's being a little bit compromised by, okay, is Tennessee in that? Where does Tennessee stand? Where does Clemson and Michigan? I was considering for a number of weeks, okay, Clemson and Michigan are the next in line. Well, Tennessee's obviously turned in the game that they just did, and in Michigan against Penn State. So I tend to think that those 2 are the next in line, but also Ole Miss. I'm still not thinking that, despite a loss here last weekend, that USC's that far away from a second-tier ranking as well. So that's kind of how I see it. Maybe Ole Miss being in this 6 to 10 range.
Gotcha. Sort of. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought for a second. Sort of along a similar line, do you on your original top 25 that actually makes sense from this week before it got taken down?
Yeah.
A lot of people were complaining about Clemson being so high.
Yeah.
Do you really understand sort of where that comes from? Because to me, they have, even if you think the ACC is overrated, they have 3 quality, tough wins over at least good teams, which is more than a team like, I could argue that's better than a team like Georgia has. Obviously, they have the one really impressive win, but other than that, you're sort of searching for another quality win, maybe South Carolina if you want to put them up there.
Yeah, I had Clemson number 1 for, I believe, 2 weeks. And the reason was I thought for that stretch of time that they had collectively the two best wins in the country for any team. They had Wake Forest and North Carolina State. Well, on one hand, the North Carolina State win has been compromised. However, they've added to it with what I consider a quality win against Florida State. I think Florida State's one of the 30, 35 best teams in the country, something in that range. So that's a quality win. And then also the Georgia Tech win has been increased by Georgia Tech playing better football and actually proving to be capable of beating teams like Pitt and Duke.
That's I would that was my thinking. It's like compared to some of the other teams that I think some of these people were arguing for, I would say Clemson has done probably just as much or more. So why are those people asking for them to be not up there with Georgia or Tennessee or Ohio State or teams like that?
Yeah.
And then this is, maybe you can help me with this.
Yeah.
I obviously I think Georgia is still one of the best teams in the country, but I don't understand some people, like the AP, they're ranked number 1. Obviously, I think you and me can probably both agree they probably haven't really necessarily earned that number 1 ranking, at least based on what they've done so far this season. But
yep.
I understand they have the talent, but the only team to me that has shown on the field so far to be relatively infallible this season, to me, has been, well, I guess it's 2 teams. It would only really be Ohio State and Michigan to me, and maybe UCLA. But obviously, I think I can separate UCLA just based on being in the Pac-12 and things like that. But Georgia had that half against Kent State. They had that whole game against Missouri. I think their offense even struggled for a while against Samford, right? So I don't know if that's just they don't wake up for those games, maybe, or if they really have an underlying issue.
See, you're thinking in a lot of different ways in which, in a sense, you're mirroring the process that I go through and the thinking that I have. On one hand, I look at somebody like Georgia, and I don't want to just elevate them and keep them there just because they're Georgia. They won it last year. We know how talented they are, 5 stars all over the place. And anytime they struggle, that it gets discounted as, oh, they just didn't show up. They didn't care. They won. No, it's they had a game scheduled against Kent State and they did not perform well. Well, I'm not going to shoot them down to 17 just because they struggled with Kent State, but at the same time, they should be held accountable for that lackluster performance, especially when it was followed up with another one against a pretty marginal Missouri team that's 0-3 in the SEC and is a team that lost by 4 touchdowns to Kansas State. So if Missouri's capable of losing by 4 touchdowns to Kansas State, and then they turn around, and of course, every game, every location is different from week to week. But you have to look at it that way. And for Georgia, on the positive side, I think, okay, they still probably, now this was my thinking a couple weeks ago, I'll kind of revise it if I can come up with another game. I don't think that I can, that they still have the single most dominant, impressive performance on the season. Not that 49-3 is the most impressive score. There have been scores better than that, but when you put the score and the opponent together, not that teams haven't been beaten that are better than Oregon possibly, but you put those 2 components together, that is the most impressive performance the entire season. And then South Carolina, I don't know what to do with them quite yet, because basically South Carolina beat a Will Levis, a Kentucky team without Will Levis. That's their big win on the season. Otherwise, they were completely trashed by Georgia, and they lost in a 2-score game that they were never really in against Arkansas. So how good is South Carolina? Well, Georgia still just hammered them into submission. Then they went through this 3-week stretch of not playing well. but still winning the games. The Missouri game, I watched the second half of that game, and that wasn't a game in which Georgia fumbled the ball 3 times inside the 10-yard line and had a blocked punt or muffed 3 punts or anything like that. They were honestly outplayed for the majority of that game. And actually, Missouri threw a ball down to inside the red zone with about 5 minutes left in the game, up by 3 points, that put them in position to go up by 10, and it was called back due to hands to the face by an offensive lineman that I thought, wow, Georgia could have been seriously in trouble here, but they got bailed out by a hands to the face call, and it suddenly became 3rd and 22, and Missouri was done, and they had to punt, and so Georgia was able to salvage that game. But they have rebounded now against 2 bad teams, but still blasted Auburn, blasted Vandy. So I try to balance all that out. The poor performance versus the dominant performance, and obviously they're undefeated and haven't been, outside of the Missouri game, I would say they were seriously challenged in that game. They could have lost that game. And that's kind of where I stand on Georgia.
Yeah, and just you brought up what we were talking about, South Carolina. They have a game against Texas A&M this week. I think if they win that game, they have in about 4 weeks when they go to Florida, they will probably, if they were to win that game against Texas A&M, they will probably be a top maybe 15 team when they go to Florida at 7-2 because of who they play after A&M. It's Missouri and Vanderbilt. So just being, I think, an SEC team at 7-2, they will probably be in the top 15 at that time if they were to beat Texas A&M this week.
You mean in the standard AP rankings?
Yes, I think obviously
because that's
you and me could probably understand that South Carolina is not one of the 15th best team in the one of the 15 best teams in the country, or at least there's nothing they can do in the next 3 weeks to probably prove that. Maybe by the end of the season, but I don't think.
But you're right. South Carolina has beaten some bad Group of 5 teams out of conference. They beat Kentucky without Will Levis, not saying that they couldn't have won that game otherwise, but still, that's a pretty big factor in the game. They got completely outclassed by the 2 best teams on their schedule. They got obliterated by one, and they got, the Arkansas game wasn't close. The final was like 44-30, but they scored 2 late touchdowns. It was like 44-14 in that game. At one point. So they haven't beaten anybody, but then except for the Kentucky game, that's compromised. And you're right. Now they're catching a point on their schedule if they can get by Texas A&M, which to me is a solid win, strong win. Texas A&M's nothing close to what they were projected to be, but they're still full of talent, and it's a good win. It's a good win. It's a top 30 win. And then they catch that stretch that you just outlined, and they could find themselves at 7-2. And I don't know where I would rank them at that point. The thing is, I will say, Holden, is that it appears as though the longer I do this, is that teams like a South Carolina can find a soft spot in the schedule, can catch a few breaks and get to like a 7-2 record. And even though my mind processes weeks in advance thinking, well, they're not going to be in my top 15 because they will have not proven much by then. There's enough teams that lose games that are being compared to them that, and really significant wins are tough to find, that maybe they will be somewhere in my rankings. I don't know.
Yeah. That's sort of a similar hope I have as a Wake fan. Just we have some games we should win the next couple weeks, and just hope for chaos around us in the rankings. Just a couple quick more things. Sorry, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I think I caught the end of a call you were having maybe last week or something, 2 weeks ago. There was someone on here talking about they felt like there was more parity this year, I think, in college football than in other years. And I think you had disagreed with them. I understand that you sort of see a top 3, 4, a top group that's sort of above the rest. But would you say that sort of maybe from like a 7th team or so to like 15, there's probably a lot of teams around there. There's probably a group of 10 teams in the top 15 to 20-ish range. There's probably about 10 teams in there that are probably all pretty similar.
Yeah, they're
And
inseparable,
maybe that's
basically.
different than in the past, sort of. I feel like in the past, there was sort of a top, in my head, there's been sort of a top 10 to 12. And then in that top 10 to 12, you've had an elite 3 or 4 or 2 teams.
Yeah.
And then you've had sort of 10 to 12 total teams that are sort of like the New Year's 6 teams. Like if you're looking at like
Yep,
the New Year's
sure.
6, you could probably distinguish
Yep.
those. I
Yep.
think right now there are 20 teams maybe still. And that's, throw out the group of 5 team maybe because there's probably quite a few of those. But 20 Power 5 teams that could probably realistically still earn a New Year's 6 bid.
Well, the only way I'll push back on that, and I get your point. And again, the way I looked at it, asked that question, is that during the playoff era, just about every season, there's 2 or 3 teams that are better than everybody else. And that plays out throughout the season. Okay. And then, like you said, the caller was pushing the narrative that there's more parity this season. And then I pushed back with how I see this season playing out similar to previous seasons. The one thing I'll say about what you just said, yes, there are more teams that seem to be in the running for a New Year's 6 game right now, but realize we're only 7 games deep into the season. So most of the games that are going to distinguish those teams are still yet to be played. So this glut of teams, let's say from 7 to 25, right now, we're going to have not with everyone, because some of them are going to lose 2 of them and or win 2 and lose 1 or whatever. But there's going to be a distinction made between these teams because they're going to start playing each other in conference.
I think that's
follow
fair.
me?
Yeah, I think I just feel like sort of just having watched, a decent number of games, it just looks like a lot of the teams, there's been a lot of also that elite group at the top. I know that you still see the talent difference in Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama. But if you had to ask me, I would either say there's 1 or 2 teams in that elite group, and that could be Ohio State and Michigan, and maybe Tennessee, that have shown that they're up there so far this year. Or there's 7 teams, and that would be Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Tennessee, and you could maybe even throw in UCLA so far this year. And I don't know that any of those teams, I think obviously like you're saying, Ohio State, they'll have a chance to prove if they really are in my head the best team in the country, because that's what I think they are personally, and they'll have probably a chance to prove that with some of their games. And other teams will have a chance to maybe overtake them.
And I think I understand where you're going with that. Ohio State's given a lot of, they're obliterating teams, but they haven't played anyone that good. So they're given a lot of credit because of who they are. If Oklahoma State had the same resume as Ohio State, they wouldn't be given as much credibility.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Talent,
because Ohio State, has the talent and they're always up there. That's just similar to a few weeks ago, after about 3 weeks of the season, Oklahoma State, bringing up Oklahoma State, was ranked 8th in the AP. And I had a bunch of people criticize me because I didn't have them ranked anywhere. They had beaten Central Michigan, Arizona State, and an FCS team. And I had a lot of people respond to my top 25 because they looked at the AP and thought, why aren't you ranking Oklahoma State? You're an idiot. And I was like, well, the reason Oklahoma State's ranked that high in the AP doesn't have anything to do with them beating Arizona State and Central Michigan and an FCS team. It has everything to do with the preseason perception that they were a top 10 team and they haven't lost yet. Whereas if this was 5 years ago and Oklahoma State was an unranked team to start the season and had beaten Central Michigan, Arizona State, and an unranked team, they'd still be unranked.
Yeah. Like to your point, like if I had to pick a playoff right now, I think I'd probably go Tennessee, Clemson, Michigan, UCLA, to be honest. Because Georgia and Alabama have both struggled against – Alabama's a loss, and Georgia struggled against a mediocre team. And in my head, there's not any other, like, impressive undefeated teams. There's TCU.
Yeah.
TCU might have to be in there.
And Ohio State's best win is, I guess, Notre Dame.
Yeah. It's either Notre Dame or one of the random Big Ten teams they've played. I guess we'll have to see at the end of the season.
They've played Rutgers, Michigan State, and Wisconsin. So, yeah.
All right. I have
played anyone.
Yeah, 2 more quick things for you. This might be an unanswerable question. Do you know what's going on with Notre Dame? Can you solve that mystery?
That's a great question. Well, they lost their starting quarterback.
Was that before the Stanford game, or was that farther back in the season?
Oh yeah, they lost Tyler Buckner. Shoot, I'll look it up, but they lost Tyler Buckner pretty early in the season. So they're playing with their backup quarterback, who is he's a runner, Drew Pine, but I think that's a significant downgrade. Not that Tyler Buckner was a star because he was just winning the job for the first time, but he played significant snaps in important games last year. Man, other than that, it's a great question. The only other excuse I could make for them, so he got hurt in the Marshall game, game 2. So he's only played 2 games, their starting quarterback. So they've been playing with their backup ever since.
Well, they've been 3-1 ever since.
Yeah, they looked like they were getting things back together after they beat North Carolina. That was a pretty significant win. That was their best win of the season.
Yeah, that's my biggest question is how do they go beat a team that I think is genuinely probably a top 30, 35 team?
Yeah.
And they go, the score is misleading for that game.
Yeah, it
was really a 4-score game.
Yeah. And another top 30 or 35 team in BYU.
And then they lose to Stanford.
Stanford had not beaten an FBS team for over a year and has just been dreadful. My only other disclaimer, I don't want to call it an excuse. I'm not here to make excuses for Notre Dame for sure, because every result is, you have to be held accountable. I got to think the way they played against Ohio State, I think they prepared and they gave everything they could, everything they had. They were so focused, and going into a football season, that first game, if you've got that kind of an opponent, that's everything you are focused on and laser focused on for the entire offseason and for the entirety of fall camp is playing Ohio State, and they gave it their best shot. And they were just, again, they lost to Marshall. They shouldn't have. That's not an excuse, but just knowing how human beings operate, I got to think that they were a bit down after that Ohio State game and a bit beat up.
Yeah, I wonder, they have Syracuse, Clemson, and USC on their schedule. Are they going to get blown out by those 3 teams, or are they going to give one of them a game? Are they going to beat one of them? What Notre Dame team will show up? The team with the talent that they have, or the team that just lost to Stanford?
Well, I'm going to be surprised if they get blown out by Syracuse.
That's probably fair. Syracuse probably not, but Clemson or USC, that would be, even probably being in those games would be contrary to several of their performances this year. All right, my last quick thing, Mark. Have you seen the spread for the Alabama-Mississippi State game?
No, let me guess. I'm usually good at this. They're playing in Tuscaloosa. I'm going to say that Alabama's a 19.5 point favorite.
I believe, let me make sure. I believe it is 21. Yes, 21 points.
All right.
Mississippi State has had a pretty prolific offense for the most part this year, right? Until Kentucky, sort of, right?
Well, okay. You I was going to answer your question until you threw in until Kentucky. Yes, they did not have a good game against Kentucky. They had 225 total yards. They only scored the 17.1 on a pick six. So their offense only scored 10 points. Yeah.
And Alabama's just had a poor, bad, awful defensive performance against Tennessee. Mississippi State I know that they're running the ball more, but they run an air raid offense, and Alabama, frankly, doesn't. I mean, Alabama couldn't even learn to defend the same receiver who caught 5 touchdown passes. They couldn't even learn to just double team that one guy and try to make Hendon Hooker throw to someone else.
Yep.
So my question is, can they even prevent Mississippi State from scoring enough points to cover that spread?
Well, I'm going to take a little history example. To Texas A&M.
Sorry, can you say that again? I might have lost you, Mark.
Yeah, I think we had a glitch there. My bad. Who did Alabama play the week after they lost to Texas A&M last year?
Was it? I'm sure they blew him out because it's Nick Saban.
I'm not 100% sure. I wouldn't bet my mortgage on it. Well, actually, I would now because I just sold my house, so I don't. But anyway,
for some reason, Ole Miss is the team in my head, but that doesn't feel right.
I'm like 90% sure this is going to fit into my.
Mississippi State.
Wait a minute. Yeah. I was looking at the wrong year. Yeah, 2021. They played Mississippi State the next week, and they beat them by 40.
To be fair, I would say this Mississippi State team
on the road
probably a little bit better than that one.
No, a little bit.
And this Alabama team I guess we'll see, but I feel like they're not as good as they were last year. Uh-oh, I might be.
Okay, it looks like we're back. My apologies there. We're having internet issues, and we've been on for, good Lord, 3 hours and 45 minutes. So we've been on way too long. What am I getting paid by the hour? About 4 cents. All right. Jordan, that's about the only thing I've mastered. So Holden, let's finish up here. What else you got for us?
I was just going to say, I know you've had a long day with everything that went on, so I think I've taken up more than enough of your time, Mark.
I appreciate it.
If I get a chance, I will call in Friday, right? That's the preview night?
Yes, we'll jump on here on Friday.
I will hopefully be calling in then, and I appreciate all your time, Mark, and I hope that everything ends up working out with, all that went on today with your channel and things like that.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Holden. We'll talk to you later.
Everyone make sure to subscribe, like the video for Mark.
Thank you, Holden.
Have a good night, Mark.
And on that note, actually, what you could all do for me is just give my other videos a quick click. Even if you walk away from the laptop and don't watch them. Just, I noticed, so one of the issues was that led me to look at, well, for one thing, I had people contact me on Twitter and say, Mark, I just clicked on your top 25, or I just clicked on your Big 10 power rankings, and it said video not available. So then I checked. Then I also saw on my analytics page that I had like 100,000 less views this month over the last month. So I thought, why am I down like 100,000 views? Well, because somebody deleted like 11 videos or more. So anyway, give me a bunch of clicks. That's all. I'll just say it that way. Just click on a bunch of videos and let them roll. But I'm going to either decide whether YouTube's going to restore these in time, or I'm just going to recut my Big Ten power rankings, my ACC and SEC power rankings, and I had an LSU video. So anyway, we will bring all that back in whether we wait for YouTube to do that or I just repost those videos. So I would like to also maybe hit on the 3 biggest games of the week and provide previews on that. Maybe Texas, Oklahoma State, UCLA, Oregon, Ole Miss, LSU. We shall see. Anyway, we will be here to deliver content. I should probably shut up right now because I'm going delirious. I've been sitting here since 5:30. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here. We will see you soon. That means next show is Ohio State Live at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. See you then.